Okay, at 6:36, I will call this meeting to order of the Palos Verdes Peninsula Unified School District Board of Education. It is May 27th, 2020, and again, it is 6:36. Let's begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. F, report of board action taken in closed session. There is none. All right, so then approval of the agenda. Do I have an approval of the agenda for tonight? And I believe we are going to make an adjustment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, Suzanne, can I pull one item, please?
Yes.
Can I pull agenda item R6?
Okay, so the agenda with R6 removed. Is there any other any other adjustments to tonight's agenda? No. Okay. So given that, do I have anyone who is willing to make that motion?
So moved.
All right. Thank you, Linda. And do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All votes tonight will be roll call since we are meeting remotely. So Brock?
Aye.
Crawford?
Aye.
Reed?
Yes.
Phillips?
Aye.
Seymour, yes. Okay. 5-0. The agenda is approved with the one change, which is R6 removed. All right, public communications. So H1, public comment on non-agenda items. The public will be given the opportunity to address the board at this time on topics not listed on this agenda. Remarks shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. The board reserves the right to limit public comment beyond a total of 15 minutes per agenda item. The board cannot engage in public discussion during this portion of the agenda due to the Ralph M. Brown Act. And then there's directions on how to submit a comment that was on the actual agenda that's posted publicly. I do want to add a comment on that we have changed the way we are taking public comment to accommodate the fact that we are now meeting electronically, and there's a big description of that at the top of the agenda. We are allowing anonymous speakers. And if we were in person, an anonymous speaker would come in, fill out a card, put down, a different name, maybe no name, and they would speak to us. In this case, but it would be one speaker for 3 minutes. In this case, we are allowing anonymous speakers, but I don't know who they are. And so I don't know if people are speaking for more than 3 minutes. And the issue is 3 minutes per speaker. So this is now a bigger issue. So I will seek more legal guidance on this and change our practice for next meeting so we can manage this better. It's not, it's much more useful when people actually put their name to their comments so we can actually follow up and go from there. So Megan Crawford, Board Member Crawford, has agreed to read the public comments on the non-agenda items, which which we will do in a little bit. All right. I got thrown off there. So actually we do, Megan, do we have comments on non-agenda items?
Yes.
Right, okay. So do we want to read those? You want to read those now?
Okay. So the first one is from Marissa Scott. Wow, a shocking turn of grading events. Most of my students have turned in their assignments. Although I do have 1 or 2 per class who have not, and it seems not because they can't, but because they either don't want to or do not have parental support. It is not because of the teachers or lack of school district resources. I have accepted late work and I did not ever mark it as late, even if it was 2.5 months late, especially since we are in this distressing situation. I reached out to each and every one of my students personally by emails and phone calls. It is unfortunate that after all of this hard work from my students and myself that this is the conclusion. I am saddened by this decision. I have worked hard these last 74 days, and I say 74 days because I have taken emails and graded papers through it all, nonstop and at all hours of the days and nights. Whenever my students needed me, I was there to answer questions and grade their work. Again, I am so disappointed in the board's decision to just give grades as they were last trimester. Why did you not make that decision before? It would have made it less stressful for students, parents, and teachers. We are nearly at the end of the school year, and now some of my students have just given up and have said, why do we have to do the work when we will just earn what we received last trimester? I ask you, when will they be able to learn this content again? We are robbing our youth of an important educational moment. I have asked my students to be strong and to please continue to engage in their studies. This is important as they will lose the knowledge that myself and other PVPUSD teachers can give them. Your decision will now set a precedent of how the board will act in the upcoming school year if the COVID-19 stay-at-home orders remain or return.
Okay, thank you. That was the first one. I do want to make a comment that we have started the public comment on non-agenda items, so we are not accepting any more. So whatever we have is what we're going with right now. So go ahead, Megan, for the next one.
Okay. This next one is from Francine Underwood. I have concerns about the gendered words and gender-based decisions of the board. Tim Coleman shared his thoughts during public comment. He stated his concern about board members expressing their dissatisfaction of teaching during closures. He concluded by taking offense for board members saying teachers should be thankful for having jobs. Samantha Weiss made comments similar to Mr. Coleman while adding more specific information. Like Mr. Coleman, Ms. Weiss expressed her concerns with the leadership. Unlike Mr. Coleman's comments that went without a rebuttal from the board, Ms. Weiss was rebuffed by the superintendent at the urging of board member Rick Phillips. Again, Dr. Turnus mocked the words of Ms. Weiss in a condescending manner without acknowledging Mr. Coleman's blunt and cutting comments. PVFA President Ms. Layback provided an overwhelmingly positive report and respectfully stated that teachers want to teach and students want to learn. She humbly suggested that the teachers she represents do not feel that their input was valued and that communications put out by PVUSD do not represent actual agreements and overstepped. She asked that everyone work together in a time that is difficult for everyone. Board member Mr. Phillips directed more vitriol towards Ms. Layback. He discussed behind-the-scenes negotiations leading to the MOU to embarrass her. He also called out with disgust his hatred of CTA representative Ms. Sandra Goins. He shifted back to attacking Ms. Layback's words as she looked like she was holding back tears. A close look at the faces on the video show a mix of fear and anger on the faces of both female union leaders and discomfort for the female members of the board. He then inappropriately questioned Ms. Layback like an aggressive prosecutor. The meeting turned into a debate or attack between Mr. Phillips and every female with a comment or opinion that did not align with his directive to get in line and shut up. Unsolicited, Dr. Turnus piled on the attack with Mr. Phillips. Instead of stopping the madness or recognizing the attack of a female by a misogynistic man in power, Dr. Turnus showed they have much more in common than in opposition. He finished his rant by asking Ms. Layback to control her emotions. Mr. Phillips voted against the proven work of Ms. Turnus for a raise commensurate with the position she has taken over. This is a position vacated by a man paid the second most in the school district, and according to Mr. Phillips, is still making more to stay home than Ms. Turnus is for doing the work. The female following him is apparently worth a fraction of the same amount for the same work by the men in charge. There are reasons why Rick Phillips requested a separate email system for board members at the 4-hour, 26-30-second mark of the meeting. It was obvious that Mr. Phillips and Ms. Seymour had already discussed his plan to decimate transparency at length, given her uncharacteristically quick understanding of his request.
Okay, and
I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, this next one is Mary Jones. I have been a teacher in the district for a long time. I must say that it was quite appalling to hear the treatment of teachers by board members at the last board meeting. Rick Phillips clearly planned his attack on our president, CC Layback, and nobody stepped in to support her. This kind of behavior has become customary by Rick, though so it comes as no shock. If you tolerate this behavior, you endorse it. Shame on you who allow this to happen. Mr. Brock, who writes your material? Reading from your script during the meeting clearly shows you are being run by someone else with an agenda against the great teachers of this district. I suppose the good thing is when you read from your script, you can actually articulate something. Better keep it up. We teachers of this district will not just sit back and take this treatment. Start treating us how we deserve to be treated. And this last one is from Anonymous. I would like to know what is being planned for our student athletes. As a parent of 2 student athletes, this is important to us and many other families. There has been no discussion on this topic. At the last board meeting, there was a lot of discussion on education and how to keep these kids socially distanced. There has been no discussion on the impact this will have on these kids' mental health and how taking everything away socially will affect kids of all ages. If these kids don't learn to socialize with their peers, how will they function as adults in the real world? Sports, drama, band, and all the other extracurricular activities that students were doing in school before the pandemic are just as important as their regular ed classes. As a parent, we focus on our kids' education because we want them to be successful as adults, but these activities for a lot of students is what helps them to be successful in their regular ed classes, which in turn will contribute to their success as adults. We need to remember as parents, teachers, board members, etc., what it is like to be a student. Please help me to understand what you are doing for these students that are being forgotten about. Thank you for your time. And that's it for unagendized.
Okay. All right. So, okay, thank you. So Trent, did we have anything that came in via Zoom for unagendized?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving right along, we will move to public comment on open session agenda items. We typically call these as the item is mentioned. We do the same thing, so the public will be given the opportunity to address the board during each agenda item. Remarks shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. The board reserves the right to limit public comment beyond a total of 15 minutes per agenda item. Again, we're going to start the item and I will call for public comment. And if there's not any, then we won't accept any once we've started. So people have had an opportunity since last Friday to make public comments if they want to on items. And obviously if we have Zoom, we will take those and we will take the written ones. And we can decide per item to take them before or after we discuss the item. All right, so moving right along to approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for May 13th?
So moved.
Okay, and do I have a second?
Second.
All right, let's do a roll call vote then. Brock?
Aye.
Crawford?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Phillips?
Aye.
Seymour, aye. Okay, that passes 5-0. Board president announcements. Oops, I actually have those, but I don't have them pulled up. Let's see. Sorry about that, guys. Give me 1 second here. Let me get a second to pull those up. I didn't make a copy on that, sorry. Can I go out of order? I mean, I know we're going to do the recognition of student board members. Let me do this. Let me have the student board members recognition happen now, and then I will pull up the comments and I can read them at the end, but let's do that. So we are going to recognize and thank all of our student board members for joining us tonight. I know you're happy we're at the very beginning of the agenda. So Lucy, Siraj, and Serena, thank you so much for serving on our board. We have certificates for you to thank you for all the time you put into it. I know people might think you just show up for a meeting, but it's actually a lot more than that. I know you read things before, you provide us input, we really appreciate it. Let me see if anybody else on the board wanted to have anything to say to any of you. And then I think Trent has the certificates he's going to show on our screen. Is that true, Trent?
Yes, hang on one second and I will.
I'll
No
just,
problem.
Can you
I'll
see
just
that?
say that it was my honor last fall to get to know you, 3 board members. Every year I'm blown away by our student board members, and you guys raised the bar even higher by your thoughtful contributions to so many of our discussions this fall. And student board member alumni group is a family, and we're always here for you. And hopefully you can get to know some of the kids who are now in college who are board members as well, because they're a great resource for you. But we wish you the best of luck. And gosh, I'm going to miss you guys. You can come back and visit anytime you want.
So true. Okay, so does anybody else on the board want to say their thanks or anything? You don't have to. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
I'll say thanks. I always enjoy hearing the voice of the students on the board and the contributions that all 3 of you made. And I guess Serena, you've already graduated, right? And you're still coming to our board meeting. So thank you for doing that. You know, I think, you know, especially on certain topics, like the homework policy, on which we had some discussion on, and on the grading policy, I think it's invaluable, the role that the student board members play in bringing the voice of the students to the board, and really appreciate you doing that. And best of luck in your next phase of life. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you, all of you, for joining us this past year. And it's great to get experience with, you know, your local government, especially the school district, which you guys are a part of. And hopefully you can remember this and continue to take that passion towards advocating for needs and representing young people in the community and what you guys need. So continue to take that forward in your life, and good luck with what you decide in the fall and beyond. Thank you.
I'd like to echo my fellow board members and their thank you for your contributions to our district and to our community and to our students. You guys have provide insight, provide history, provide background. It's greatly appreciated. You guys, I'm looking forward to seeing what's next in your lives. You guys are all so impressive that I hope you come back and let us know how things are going. So thank you.
I hope you feel like your time with us was valuable. We really felt like it was. It is. The hearing from our student board members is so, it's always, you know, a different take, obviously, even from different students. So I have only been the president now for 6 months. I've gotten so many more emails from students, and I don't know if that's because you guys go back to your schools and talk about what happens at the board meetings, and I know you report. But I think it's been great that we're much more engaged. At least I've been much more engaged with kids I don't know, students I don't know. And that's really great. Someone actually called me today and asked me a question about the grading policy. And it was not a number I knew. So it was kind of surprising. And maybe his mother said, just call her and see what she says. But I have to think that the more you're out speaking at your schools on behalf of what we are all trying to do to make our district better, you know, is really appreciated. And you all could do other things with your time, and we appreciate that you put your time in with us. We really do. So, and the next item, you're going to get to do your final presentation and comments to us. So thank you so much. And I actually really think this is sad that we're not together in person. So I hope we get to do that. We don't get to take a picture together. This is the best thing you can do, is take this screen picture, which is kind of sad. So hopefully we will have a reason to, not a reason, but hopefully we'll have an ability to get together at some point in the near future. So thank you all. Let me go on and read the board president announcements for tonight. So tonight's board meeting, Board of Education meeting, is being recorded and live streamed via a link on the district website. We were having an issue with that, but I think it's okay now. The district is still accepting new student enrollment for the 2021 school year. Information is available at on the district website, pbpusd.net, or by contacting the Enrollment Center via email. That address is enroll, ENROLL, at pbpusd.net. The district's adult education and after-school enrichment programs are now offering online classes. Please visit the district website, pvpusd.net, for class and registration information. And lastly, the Peninsula Education Foundation's summer program is offering online classes for each school level. Please visit pvpss.com for class and registration information. So with that, with the board president announcements, I move to K, report of our student board members. So do I have a volunteer of who wants to go first? You can raise your hand, or
I'll
I
go
can just.
first.
Okay, thank you, Lucy.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Chernis. Thank you for having me. The Seeking community is happy to report the end of a successful 2 weeks of AP testing as of last Friday. I know our AP students are deserving of a pat on the back after a long year of hard work. We have 2 shout outs tonight. The first going to PV's girls lacrosse team for winning the CIF Academic Team Championship, and the second going to our girls cross country team for recording the highest GPA of any athletic team in the South Bay. These teams are a great example of seeking excellence on and off the field. In addition to Senior Athlete of the Year nominees being announced, tomorrow seniors will drop by campus to pick up their cap and gowns and senior awards. PVASB is helping recognize our almost graduates with Senior Week this week. Days like Taking It Back Tuesday give seniors a chance to reminisce on their high school years and celebrate all of their accomplishments. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to personally thank all of the board members and Dr. Chernis for allowing me to serve as PV High student representative for this school year. My experience has taught me so much about local government and my school district, and I'm so thankful that you all allowed me to share my opinions and perspectives on important issues. I will miss attending meetings next year, but I know that I've learned many valuable skills from my position that I will continue to take with me to college and beyond. Thank you, and this concludes my final report.
Thank you. I hope you do know that you can always be a part of, the system, right? Because you are now and you're making a difference, which is, the whole point here. So thank you, Lucy. Okay, and who wanted to go after Lucy? Serena. Serena raised her hand first. Okay.
Wait, who's going?
You are. Oh, Serena. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I thought you heard me. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Chernis, and executive cabinet. It has been a while, and it's good to be back joining you again. While we have not been on site at school, there has still been a lot going on at the ranch. Faculty and staff went out last week and delivered lawn signs to our graduates, celebrating their achievements, and will continue to do so as more graduates complete graduation requirements. And I do also want to thank Rancho Del Mar for doing such a personal approach to that. They came by my house last week, and it was super sweet. Speaking of graduates, Rancho Del Mar has celebrated 24 early graduates this year. This number will continue to grow as June approaches. We look forward to recognizing and celebrating our graduates with our ceremony in June. The ceremony will either be virtual or a drive-through graduation. We are still working out the final details. This fall, 6 Rancho Del Mar students will be transferring back to either Penn or PV High as they have successfully met the requirements to transfer back. We wish both our transfer students and graduates the best of luck in their future endeavors. Before I finish, I would like to thank the Board of Education and Superintendent Chernis for giving me the opportunity to serve as this year's student board member. I feel so fortunate to have been able to be a part of the board. It has been an enriching and enlightening experience, and one I will take with me into my future. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, let's go lastly to Suraj.
Good evening, board, and thank you for having me. First of all, I'd like to say congratulations to our students for successfully completing the first ever online AP tests. It's been a difficult process, but everyone has handled everything with such optimism and enthusiasm that we're really able to get through this as a community and as a school. Now I'd like to state my appreciation toward the Peninsula teachers and staff. The passion that these people have for our students truly shines through in all occasions, especially in the past few days when they organized hundreds of cords, cap and gowns, scholarships, department awards, and cookies to be handed out to every student in the senior class with a contactless distribution system. Thank you so much for celebrating the senior class during these special circumstances. And a special thank you to Mr. Wheeler for putting together the Shirts of Orange Nation slideshow as a part of this year's virtual senior breakfast. In other news, Peninsula students remain dedicated to helping our community stay safe and healthy. Thank you to everyone who dropped off notes for essential workers and first responders. Cards have been delivered or are on their way to 3 different hospitals, 3 different grocery stores, numerous elder care facilities, and even a fire station and post office. In addition, thank you to our FRC robotics team, the Phantom Cats, for joining the Southern California Makers COVID-19 response effort to supply local medical teams and other first responders with much needed personal protection equipment during this unprecedented pandemic. Working from safe spaces at home, the team has been 3D printing PPE face shield frames and ear saver mask tensioning straps, delivering hundreds of pieces to date. And finally, as this is my last meeting, I'd like to say a heartfelt thank you to the board members, administration, and members of our community engaged in these meetings. Being a student board member has been such a valuable educational government experience, from learning the importance and use of surveys and data, especially in our district, to giving some student perspective in intense discourse about policy. And it has been truly gratifying to contribute to this district, to which I owe so much. I hope to stay active in this family and community in the future. Thank you, and this concludes my last report.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, Suraj. We all appreciate it. We appreciate all that you guys have to offer and all the time and energy you put into being our student board members. It's kind of a tough night, honestly, so it's hard to say goodbye. But thank you. So you can stay as long as you would like. You don't have to stay for the whole meeting. It's kind of a short agenda. I don't want to jinx myself, but you know, it's not as long as normal. So anyway, thank you so much. Now, I was told that maybe it's hard to hear this meeting. I don't know if Trent got that message, but I have no idea how to help or how to fix it. I do know that I have learned in my short career as a Zoom person that I do much better with earbuds because I can hear better and people can hear me better. So those listening shouldn't impact, but I know for all of us in our houses, sometimes it just makes it easier. So I hope that the video audio is okay and can be, heard. So, all right, well, thank you. Now, moving right along, are we going to have, let's see, I don't think we have a report of our PBFA leadership.
Yeah, we
Anyone?
do. Let me let her in.
Okay, we do. Okay.
Yes. And I'm going to let Joan Lewis in also.
Okay, great. So CC and Joan, okay.
Yes. So give them a second to join.
All right.
I'm sorry, I was just buffering. So did you just ask me?
No, well, no, I was just saying that we were waiting for CC and Joan.
I'm here.
Okay, I got it. I can see you now. So very good. So why don't we go ahead with CC? So that'd be on agenda item L.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me as always. As always, I'd like to start out with a shout out, and this one goes to district officials. The end of this instruction is June 5th, and we will spend the last week of our year picking up the pieces of our school year. Returning student work, reclaiming our Chromebooks, textbooks, materials, grading, completing report cards. So thank you for giving us that time to handle the work that you trust us as professionals to do. It will also be a time to begin thinking about the future and what our careers will look like moving forward. As a side note, I do ask that in the future, if anyone on the board takes issue with the position of me or the position of the union, that you give me some advance notice to be able to speak to that in a public meeting. I know that you all have the opportunity to have PowerPoints and agendas presented to you in advance, and I would expect that I have the same respect in this position. So I ask for that, should anyone take issue with things with me in the future. Like everyone else in America, teachers are scared of what the future holds. We need reassurance. We need reassurance that you know that we teachers are making the best out of a bad situation. We need reassurance that you plan to protect and defend your employees. We all need to stick together right now. Now is the time for grace, especially as you have adopted a no harm grading policy. We are on the same page understanding the importance of not hurting students right now. Still, our work year ends on June 11th. And while you say students can turn in work late, teachers are under no obligation to correct work that is submitted after that. Allowing work after the day grades are due and the school year is done is a gray area. It's important to clarify that for the community. Stating that teachers can turn in late work doesn't mean that teachers have to grade it. We need to be on the same side here with the same goal in mind. Please understand that as teachers, these are some of the real fears that we're facing right now. With talk of impending budget cuts and so much uncertainty, and with what school will even look like, will we go back? How will we go back? Will I even have a job to go back to? I know that Dr. Chernus has assembled a steering committee to discuss guidance on how to proceed, but the fears are real, and all of the moving parts are complicated and significant, to say the least. How will budget cuts impact our district? That is a big question that we all want to know. I can tell you that this is how we are responding. PVFA has activated a call to action to all of our members to contact their local government officials to recommend that the governor pass a budget that puts forth no cuts to education, as well as for our folks to email their federal elected leaders to ask for the government to pass the bailout education with the HEROES Act. We are in this together, and we are doing our part to try to cushion the blow to public education. So we ask the same in return from the school district. The fiscal crisis of 2008, a lot of teachers were laid off. Teachers made sacrifices and gave up pay to help the greater good of the district. During that time, the district reserves grew and grew. They never dropped, and the rainy day fund never lessened. This crisis is a bigger one, and the teachers will again step up. The stigma of how teachers were treated then, when we took one for the team, hasn't really left for those of us who were here during that time. And we need to know that you will make wiser choices moving forward. At the end of the day, we'll look back at this time as history as probably the worst crisis of our lifetime, but we will be remembered for how we handled each other, the way we came together as a community, the grace we extended to others, the way we held up members of our own who were hurting or struggling or disadvantaged. I hope that we can all look at the bigger picture here as a turning point in not only our nation's history, but as the time the Palos Verdes Peninsula Unified School District and the community all came together to do what is right for our students, for our teachers, for our classified staff, and for the community. Maya Angelou once said, "People may forget what you say or do, but they won't forget how you make them feel." We need to feel supported. We need to feel safe, especially in these uncertain times with emotions running high and the future full of uncertainty. I hope that we can have the important conversations respectfully and to be able to always come back and work together as we move through these uncharted waters in the same boat with the same goal, and that is what's best for kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Cece. Linda?
I just wanted to jump in and just make sure that you saw Sunday's photo essay in the Southern California News Group newspapers, including the Daily Breeze, that highlighted several of our teachers. It was a labor of love for my family to be involved with that project. The photographer that did it did an amazing job. And we have one of our teachers on the front of the Daily Breeze and both teachers in newspapers all throughout Southern California, highlighting how they're working from home and some of the battles that they're fighting. And so when you talk about coming together in the community, that was just a really small thing that all of us are doing to highlight the work of teachers, so that also people in the community who don't have kids in the schools really understand what it's like for you guys day to day when you're teaching in your bedroom.
Amen, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great piece in the paper, Linda. That was awesome. So, but we are all obviously on the same team, and we're going to get a lot more done if we can agree to work together. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy anywhere in this country. It's not going to be easy anywhere in California. But I think we're all here and dedicated to doing the best thing for our kids, for our teachers, and for the entire community, because our parents can't go back to work till our kids go back to school. And we all want some normalcy of our life back, right? And we want to do it in a safe way. So I don't think you're going to find anybody here not on board. I didn't quite understand the beginning part of your comment about a presentation, and I don't know what you were saying exactly, but something about not getting, I don't know. I wanted to make sure I understood what you wanted up from us, but I couldn't quite get it.
Okay, and I'm happy, thank you for asking. I'm happy to clarify. I felt like last time when I came and I presented, I was put on the hot seat, and I would have been happy. I mean, I'm happy to do that. I just would have liked some advance notice of what it was that I was going to be speaking to, because I feel like it wasn't an agenda item. It wasn't a PowerPoint. It wasn't something that I could speak to. I mean, I think I did the best that I could in the moment. I just felt like if there's anything that comes up in the future, I would be more than happy to address it with a little heads up on, hey, I'd like you to address this because it is a public forum. And I feel that I've deserved that respect, and I appreciate the opportunity to be in these meetings. So I hope that we can have that moving forward. That's all.
Good. Okay, I got that now. I understand that. You did make a comment also about grades and grading and the deadlines and the dates. So I do think it makes sense if we need to put out something that clarifies. I do know that when the year is over, grades are due, teachers are off, essentially, but that we had made a date later so that when grades go in, kids can make choices after the fact. That I was under the impression didn't really take work on the teacher's end. I know it's different if teachers give incompletes and then they have to monitor work that lasts longer. But Lindsay, did you want to add anything or say anything and make sure that's clear that people understand that the teachers are, when the year's over and they put their grades in, then there's that 2-week window and the final grades are in as to when you can change your grade if you want to the pass fail or whatever it is.
I'll work with our administrators to make sure that they message that as we start to get to the end of the school year. So that way it's clear for our community and our students.
Good. Okay, good. So we don't want to have any confusion on that. All right, good. Well, thank you. Now I think we are ready to go to M and Joe. Ms. Lewis.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, the same fears and anxiety are spread wide across this entire district from all of us. So Cece, I hear what you're saying. However, we've had a lot of conversations taking place. So I just want to share some of those quick updates today. Our meeting today with Mrs. Tronis and the principals and Miss Lynn from Food Services on safe closing of schools the week of June 8th was very productive. Your principals are very aware of their site needs and are carefully crafting how to accomplish all of those tasks. So I feel much better about that, which means that I can relay to staff to feel better about that. Dr. Horvath is working within our MOU for the return of employees to school sites very soon. So we're anxious to get that out. Our district nurse, Kathy Berry, she continues to inform us on the science that drive the recommendations that we see. I particularly appreciate that coming from a medical family here in our household. It helps me to answer questions of staff and again, allay those fears about the unknown of what this is going to look like when we close up and when we reopen. Again, I want to thank those essential workers, and actually Dr. Horvath and I just said, he goes, this is going to essential workers, and I said, we're all essential workers. Mr. Califano today in our meeting stated, the inclusion aides and his support aides have just brought their A game, and it doesn't go unnoticed by the principals, everybody who's working quietly behind the scenes to support teachers and those classrooms. So I really appreciate that because they need to hear that. We're kind of hidden behind the curtain here. The upside again to our closed sites continues that we are cleaning carpets and catching up on work orders that would have normally been put off to a very short period of time in the summer. I have one site that the librarians have completely taken out every book in their library and are reorganizing the library by subject so that it is much more useful to students when they return in August. So lots of on-campus behind the scenes work being done. Some staffs are working with their PTAs and their booster clubs on what the August registration packets will look like, what they'll contain, and we'll just keep modifying that when we realize what school will really look like when the final decisions are made. Cece alluded to the Superintendent Steering Committee, which I hope is going to give us a lot of plausible solutions on what lies ahead. The only thing I might ask is I feel like we have a lack of representation from food services, and I know our food service size classified employees are very worried about their positions and want a voice to be heard. So I don't know if I could just put a plug in that maybe we add food services to that steering committee. CSEA is ready to sunshine to the board through Dr. Horvath, our initial proposal for negotiations for 2021. We know we're not talking compensation at this time because it's looking fairly grim and we just need to get to some kind of final numbers here. Again, thank you for your time. I just want you to know classified's still here behind the scenes and we are anxious to see our families.
Oh, thank you. I think we're also anxious to go out and be back to seeing our family and friends and all of our, favorite. You run into somebody who works at the district, and you're just so happy to stop and from 6 feet away say hi. So I hear you, and thanks for the update. I did make some notes about food services. Thank you. And I think we are moving on to report of the superintendent. Does anybody have anything for Cece or Joan before I move on? Okay, let's go to. So before we have Dr. Cherna speak, do we want to do the one public comment we have on this, Megan? Yeah. Actually, and Trent, do we have any Zoom public comments at all?
No, we have no Zoom people joining tonight.
Okay, thank you. So then let's have this one public comment. This is the opportunity for public comment on the superintendent's report. So we just have the one, and let's go with that, Megan.
Okay, this is from Diana Elliott. I am deeply disappointed and disheartened that Dr. Chernis and other local superintendents petitioned the state to lower recommended safety protocols for our school reopening instead of petitioning for the funding necessary to reopen and operate under the recommended safety protocols. It should now be clear to all stakeholders that schools are essential to the proper operation of our economy and society and should be funded as such. Not only are schools necessary for educating our youth, but also for providing childcare so millions of parents and guardians can go to work and earn a living. We also learned that school is the only place many of our children get fed or find safety from threatening home environments. Therefore, instead of always being put in the position of beggar, we should be insisting on funding levels commensurate with our necessity to our society and economic way of life. We should not, once again, shortchange our youth by decreasing their educational intensity, nor unnecessarily experimenting with their health and safety. Thank you.
All right. I think that's just the only comment. Is that right? There was one that came via email. I don't remember, very late. I don't remember what item that goes under. So if you can just remember to read that at the right time, because I didn't pull it off.
Yeah, that was the tech.
For tech committee. Okay. All right. Very good. So then Dr. Chernis, I'll hand it over to you for your report for us.
All right. Well, I am very pleased to announce that we are in a position to recommend one of our own, somebody. It's always great to be able to promote from within our organization. And as you know, we promoted Sandy to principal at Montemalaga, so we had an opening as assistant principal at PVIS. So at this time, we'll be recommending, and we're asking Ms. Egan to join us. We're recommending Jennifer Egan as the new assistant principal at PVIS. Jennifer has spent 18 years at PV High School. So she's done a great work at PV High School as the district AVID director there. And she has also been part of our newly established District Aspiring Leaders Institute, which is great that we can get somebody that was really interested in leadership to join us. She's done many things. She's been an English teacher, AVID coordinator, department lead, WAS team leader. She's assisted as a track and cross country coach. At this time, I'd like to welcome Jennifer to just say a few words.
Thank you. Well, really, I just wanted to say thank you to Board President Seymour, members of the board, Superintendent Chernus, and the Executive Cabinet. I want to thank you for this opportunity to be the assistant principal at Palos Verdes Intermediate. While I will always hold my PV High students and colleagues close to my heart, I am really excited to join this PBIS team and to help them continue to grow and evolve in positive ways to help all students. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Okay, so thank you. Next thing we're gonna do is move on to some good news, more good news. I like to start with good news, and that's on enrollment. So I'd like to ask our Deputy Superintendent to queue up a few slides to update the board on enrollment. So we do have some good news regarding enrollment. As you can see here, by the end of the first month of the school year, we had 10,941. This is an exam. This is just a quick snapshot of where we are currently. So you can go to the next slide. So this is really encouraging. What you see here is a point-to-point enrollment. And what it shows is that we're 111 more at this time this year than we were last year. So if this trend continues, we could be, you know, over 200 more students at the start of next year. Now while that could help, you know, with ADA funding, we're not sure how funding is going to work next year. It may just be like a hold harmless model, but we do know over time that this is really helpful for us, the fact that we see growth. And so the goal at this point is to continue to see growth and to continue to have students want to be here. Next slide. As you can see, in all areas, we seem to be growing. We're seeing an increase in TK and K enrollment. That's the most important enrollment for a school district because those kids you're going to get for 12 years of funding. We have fifth grade, which is a smaller fifth grade class. That does impact intermediate, so we could see little smaller intermediate schools and increasing at the high schools. So finally, you know, this is a time of uncertainty, but I did want to update the board on an encouraging sign as we look to next year.
Okay. Can I make a comment about that,
Sure.
Dr. Chernus? Yeah. So somebody brought up to me a good idea, and that is with the uncertainty amongst some of our families, do we want to think about having some kind of an enrollment privilege for kids that might be in transition? Normally, we offer that kind of an opportunity for juniors. If their parents had to move out of the area, they could at least finish the senior year. But I don't know if we want to do that, consider that for other grades or for temporary situations. And I know if families are experiencing temporary moves or things that they don't know if they're going to be temporary, how should they go about, number one, letting us know so they don't just essentially leave the district and maybe it's not going to be for a long time. And then how do we think about, I don't know if we can, I don't know, but is there a way to say if you're in 7th grade this year that you can finish middle school, or if you're in 4th grade, you can finish elementary school so that we have less disruption for our students? How would we work through that?
We will take that in consideration. We have to look at our policy, and any change like that, we'd have to amend our board policy.
Okay. But as far as, so that's for students that we might want to allow to stay longer if they were going to move, but any family that might be experiencing something that might not be permanent, they would just reach out to their own principal, or how would they go about finding out what their options are, essentially? You know, like say, sometimes families have to, you know, in these kind of times move in together, or, you know, temporarily to make, you know, choices. I just don't want people to take their kids out of school if they don't, you know, need to long term. And it's better, especially if they're going to unenroll and then enroll back in, you know. So I was trying to help people. negotiate that.
Okay, we'll look at that.
Okay, just to make sure everyone knows. All right, thank you. Anybody else on this? No? Okay, moving right along.
Okay, so next we have a budget update. What we're hearing from the state is, as I mentioned, a 10% reduction in LCFF, which is about $10 million to us. We've recently heard some good news that the Senate subcommittee yesterday recommended $2.85 billion that was previously from the feds, previously gone into concentration grant money that we would not receive in our district because we don't receive the concentration grant money, would be put into LCFF directly. So if that happens, and the Assembly today supported that. So we're really encouraged in that development. That for us means an additional $4 million. So it reduces our projected deficit. So we are still in plans to put a budget together with a projected deficit for the June meeting. But there is some recent developments that could help us out, in addition to, obviously, if there's a federal money to states in a new stimulus package, that would help us out a little bit more. So that's where we are with the budget. Any questions?
Alex, I would like to explore ways that we might be able to insulate ourselves a little bit better from having to, rely on the state as much as we do and be at their whims. Our district has a lot of unused land that is basically just sitting there dormant. And I would like to look at the opportunities where the district could retain control of these properties, but perhaps generate revenue through them. And that is something that I would like you and the district, of course with board consent, to start investigating.
Yeah, I think we need to look at all areas, this included, all revenue sources as well.
Okay. Anyone else have anything on this? No? Okay, Dr. Chernis, keep going.
Okay, so finally, let's see, my last part is on the school reopening. So the committees will begin next week. We'll have 3 next week, and then 2 the following week, and we will alternate. So we have about 25 in each committee. We're going to discuss the current guidelines. I continue to push for flexibility at the state and federal level to allow us to open with under reasonable conditions and safe conditions. So we will be updating you as we progress through the summer, and as you know, we have more board meetings to meet and discuss that as well. Mm-hmm. And that concludes my report.
Okay.
So Alex, on the guidelines, it's pretty clear that LA County is going to be more restrictive than any of the others, right? They're more restrictive than the state currently and neighboring counties, and certainly more than the federal government, which leaves it up to the states. So how are we working with LA County Public Health in terms of getting what you think are both safe guidelines and feasible guidelines to work? I know that LA County Public Health today released like a 45-page template. I glanced at it, only didn't go through it, but I know also like they did release detailed guidance on the car parades, for example, for our potential graduations to operate under.
So far, everything's been going through LA County Office of Education in working with LA County. So today, LA County Office of Education released that guidance. They specifically said in the guidance that these are not directives, they're suggestions. So they're offering us, hundreds and hundreds of suggestions. Yet we've yet to receive anything from the Department of Public Health as far as guidelines or requirements. We have voiced, many districts have voiced concerns about that, and we're still waiting on whether they're going to issue that or not. What we do have is safety recommendations from LACO, and they say they're in consultation with the County Department of Public Health, and they are recommendations and not directives.
Okay. And is it, okay. And then, you know, with the reopening committees, is there some mechanism to bring either the county DOE or DPH in to, you know, consult with them on our plans?
Yeah, I think most districts will probably, when they get closer to finalizing plans, to send those to the local agencies. So I think we do have the ability to do that as we get closer to developing something.
Thanks.
Question. Alex, the CC mentioned, you know, the teachers advocating in Sacramento, and I know you've written some things to advocate for us. What do you suggest we do? Because I read the part of the guidelines I read, it was a lot of gobbledygook, you know, make sure you have technology for kids, make sure you're putting kids first, make sure you take care of your staff, you know, things that are kind of like the no-duh things that they didn't really say anything that helps us or helps us budget, because they're not really telling you what you need to spend or what you should spend, or, you know, you limit class size. Well, what exactly does it mean, and who's going to pay for that? So
yeah, you know, they've gone from the first they said 6 feet apart, and then today they said 16 in a class. Well, 16 in a class isn't going to be 6 feet apart. So they consistently are contradicting themselves. I think we need to look at maximizing space. If we want to open school and have it be every day, we need to use inside and outside. And so we really need to start thinking about ways to offer class outside to maximize space, or we're only going to be able to offer, you know, staggered school or, you know, limited times. And so I think we need to continue to think about using all of our space. As far as advocating, we need to advocate for funding. A great example is this federal money should be an LCFF. And so I had a call with Senator Ben Allen today. I told him as much. I had a call with Al Marisucci yesterday and told him as much. So as board members, if you can advocate for that, that's a big deal for us. All the money that is coming from the Fed should be equally dispersed. And if it's not, then we get none of it. And so I think it's a great question, Ms. Reed, and I think that's a great way to help.
There's nothing that says that we as a board can't write letters. We could draft our own ideas. I think that we've made a lot of progress in this per student funding model that now has kind of changed the conversation a little bit, which is huge for us. So I am up for anything that this board wants to write. I don't know how much these things are helpful, honestly. I do get a lot of drafted things we can send out, and honestly, I never agree with all of them. I'm always like, that was really good till the very end, and I don't agree with that. So this is not going to go away. I mean, we could agendize that, you know, Linda, in the future, if you want to talk about things we specifically can write to and advocate for. Because obviously, in addition to more money, we just need specific requirements that are doable. And I'm really hoping that our parent communities, our parent groups, our parent medical community can really help us maximize, if we have options, maximize what really has the biggest impact for our students' safety and our teacher safety, knowing that everything that we do, we're going to have to pay for. And these are all unfunded, you know, requirements that they're bringing to us now. So I'm open to any kind of letter you want to write, any kind of effort you want to make. I think it's all good, because we're not going to be the school district that just takes whatever the advice is. And if that is to distance learn next year, we all say, okay, I guess that's what they want us to do. I mean, I think we all know what we want our kids to go back to school, and not everyone thinks like that. So we shouldn't assume that anyone agrees with us, and we should go out strong with what we think we want to do for our school district. And Linda, you're a great writer, so you can feel free to draft whatever you'd like for us to look at.
Okay, fair enough. I'll do that.
Yeah, I think using the outdoor space is great too. You know, we're lucky that we have it, and you know, we'd have to figure out a way to make it work, but I mean, we should.
And I just want to make sure that we don't go against the guidelines. Right, so I understand the need for funding, obviously, to be able to accomplish those things, but we want to make sure, obviously, that we follow the guidelines so that, you know, to the best of our ability, that we can protect students and staff health. My concern is, again, like a second wave coming, potentially if we don't follow things the right way, or if we do follow them and then something happens, you know, then that would be bad too, obviously, but we want to make sure that we are following them, but have the funding to be able to do so.
Linda, did you have another thought that you didn't finish?
Sorry, just that, Megan, I agree with your point. The problem is you don't know exactly what the guidelines are. And so at a certain point, you know, someone's got to make some definitive decisions so that Dr. Chernus and his staff can figure out what we're able to fund and do. That's my concern. Is at a certain point, I mean, what date is that going to be? Because there's a lot that goes into it. And to try to staff the school district, I feel bad for Dr. Horvath, but to try to staff the school district in some kind of blended model is going to be a giant mess. And so the guidelines, that's what I'm saying, the guidelines are so vague that it doesn't help us really plan to do anything. So part of it is advocating for money for us, but part of it is advocating for, if you're going to tell us we have to do something, tell us sooner rather than later.
Right.
Because it's impossible to plan. So there's kind of two aspects of it, you know, going forward.
Then if I can expand on that a little bit, I have a concern that the state is actually, they're not providing guidance. They're providing guidance, but not directives, which does, as Rick mentioned, leave Los Angeles County to come up with their own guidance, which may be more restrictive than the rest of the state. I have concern that then takes away our students' fundamental right to an education that other students in the state get. You know, other students are allowed to go to school more often. They're allowed to receive more instruction, but LA County is prohibiting us from doing that. That's a big concern. We are putting our students at a disadvantage. So we need to keep an eye on that so that when our community groups, you know, our committees get together and they come up with their solutions and their recommendations, that we are willing to talk to the county and try to persuade the county that, you know, these are guidelines that we have worked out for our community and that will allow us to have a comparable education to other students in the state. You know, we pride ourselves on being one of the best districts in the state, but LA County could make it so that we are actually one of the least educated this year.
So, I mean, I think you just have to recognize that LA County is going to have more restrictive guidelines and more precautions for a reason. It's the most impacted county in the state. And I think it would be ridiculous to make the other, you know, counties in California actually have to live under the same restrictions as LA County when they aren't, you know, seeing the same level of infection and contagiousness. And I'm really thankful that we do have, you know, a medical professionals group dedicated to providing us with input, and those consist of, you know, highly respected people in their fields who happen to live in our community and are dedicated to our district. And I think that that'll be really valuable to ensuring that we have appropriate and safe you know, protocols in place for both the staff and students to be educated.
Absolutely, Rick. But if the county doesn't agree with any of our medical community decisions, you know, we are a huge county. You know, we up here on the hill, we are totally different than the rest of LA.
Yeah, and in Palos Verdes is more impacted than the average, you know, park community in LA County. So, but I do think that so far, actually, LA County Public Health has actually done an admirable job, and in terms of managing, you know, the public health response, and with the exception of testing, which was really a national issue, that's been a major problem. And likewise, you know, I think when we get to the budget and advocacy for funding, just like we have limited reserves here in the district, which we're going to talk about with the BAC, the state has, you know, very limited reserves as well. And so there's a limit to how much additional money can come from the state. Granted, you can reallocate from priorities, but the number one priority in the state that really, you know, if you look at California's budget versus other states where we relatively overfund versus other states is actually health, which is not an area that I think you want to take away from in the midst of a pandemic. So I think actually, you know, expecting a lot of relief at the state level it's going to be tough, and that, you know, really we need to be looking for the federal government, which is the only level of government that actually can run deficits, you know, essentially because they control a printing press, right? Which the federal government actually has used in this crisis. And so I think that, you know, if we look to funding, it's really how do we get it from the federal level through the state down to us, because that's really the only, you know, true viable hope in my mind for getting additional funds into the district. Although the additional 1% from increased, you know, attendance would be useful as well, because that would be you know, another $1 million. So, you know, in terms of the problem. So if we can keep enrollment up, that's certainly something that would help us. But I do foresee that we're going to have significant costs to implement whatever safety measures are required to keep our staff safe and our students safe in a physical environment. And that's the reality that we're going to have to deal with over the next several months. And it's going to be difficult.
Yes. All true. So, Dr. Chernis, I guess we will have this on the superintendent's report every meeting from here on out. And hopefully we'll have more information. I know everybody wants more information, and it is tough because we only have what we have, and we can't make up our own rules, unfortunately. So it is important that everyone knows that we are paying attention. We do want our kids back at school. We do want our kids to be able to re-engage with their friends at school and to be active learners, but we obviously have to be responsible and only do things that are safe for our community. So I think it's a good idea. You had been putting out, and you still do put out, you know, I think it's weekly or every other week, maybe, updates to our families. And I think when people hear from you about kind of where we are, you know, that's appreciated. So I appreciate you've been doing that via email. And I would encourage you to keep doing that, even though it feels like maybe you're not saying anything too different. I think so, you know, 6 feet per child was one issue. And now I think, was it 14 or 16 kids in a class? I forget, you said 16, I think. Was the thing that we read today, and it didn't even indicate, you know, the square foot of the classroom. So we have very different size classrooms, you know, in our district. So it's obviously very hard to plan, and I think everyone has to know it's going to be a fluid summer, no matter how hard we try to nail it down. So, so if you don't have anything else, or if we don't have any other public comments on that, then we can move on. Is that true? Yep. Okay. Now, then, moving on to O, report of the Southern California Regional Occupational Center Board member, Mr. Brock.
Thank you. We met last week, and we discussed the budget moving forward. It was actually tabled until the June meeting, asking Dr. Hilaire, the superintendent, come back with recommendations for cost savings, given the fact that career technical education does not lend itself very well to a hybrid or an online model. It is definitely a hands-on approach, you know, and we are still paying our staff, but moving forward, we know that districts are severely impacted in what they're going to be able to afford. And we want to make sure that this program is viable moving forward, even with the cuts that are coming. It's a scary time for SCROC. As most people know, SoCal ROC was already, you know, on a lifeline, and this was a big wave that came and crashed on top of us. But we are looking at it. The board is highly motivated in seeing SoCal ROC continue, but we have deferred approval of the budget till June, when we see what possibly could be done to ease the overhead and the costs that we are carrying.
Okay. And you'll let us know over the summer about what their plans are for the fall?
Yes, and like I said, it doesn't lend itself to a hybrid model, right? Or even so until the county gives us guidelines, is what we can do, what we can open, you know, because it is so hands-on. You know, do we have to build physical structures between, you know, an engine, for example, so that we can have a student and staff together? It is those kinds of things that we don't know yet, because we don't have the guidelines yet, and how much that's going to cost. So where do we put the money so that we can do the most good for the most students and keep SoCal ROC viable? But yes, absolutely, I will keep you informed as we know more.
Okay, so even if you don't meet in the summer, at some point, remind me to make sure we know what is happening. I think some of those classes, like the Adobe and all that kind of thing, maybe some of those you can do, okay, remotely. They don't have to be hands-on. I don't know, but I'm hoping our kids have those opportunities next year if we can provide them.
Yes, me too. Thank you.
Okay, so now moving on to report of the PVP USD Technology Advisory Committee Board representatives, and I think that is Megan Crawford. I think let's start with the public comment on this. So we have quite a few public comments now. I'm going to go ahead and close the opportunity to provide public comments. I think we've gotten one or two since we've been meeting here tonight. Typically, we limit the amount of comments to 15 minutes. We have about maybe 6 or 8 comments total. I'm going to assume that we want to hear all of them. So if anybody doesn't want to hear all of them, we can talk about limiting to 15 minutes. We've never really done that before. I can say to anybody watching, what I do when I have Megan read the comment is I actually set my timer for 3 minutes. So some of these are long. So I'm going to set my timer when she starts speaking on behalf of whatever, whoever the person is. And then when I get to 3 minutes, I'll cut you off. And I'm just going to ask you to stop wherever it is, you were reading. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. But I feel like that's, kind of the fair way to do it. And honestly, I got to set my timer back to 3 minutes so I don't forget. You'd be amazed all the things I'm having to figure out here. So
the comments first, and then I'll do the report after.
I think let's just get let's do the comments, right? And then let's hear your report, and then we'll have a conversation about where we're going. This is not an item on our agenda that is agendized for any action. So I think people were thinking there was going to be some big action tonight, but it's not agendized as an action item. So we can provide staff with direction, but we're not going to be making a huge decision one way or the other tonight. Okay, so go ahead and start with your first person, and I will start the timer when you start talking.
Okay, this is from Jeffrey Franklick. My name is Jeff Franklick, and I am a mathematics teacher at Palos Verdes Peninsula High School, a parent of 3 students within the district, and a homeowner/community member of Rancho Palos Verdes. I come before the board this evening in regard to the pending adoption of a learning management system, hereinafter referred to as the LMS by PVPUSD for the 2021 school year and beyond. While I have served on the Technology Advisory Committee for PVPHS regarding a LMS adoption, my statements this evening reflect solely my opinion and do not represent a wider body of teachers and staff. While the merits of both Microsoft's and Google's LMS can be debated, it is generally regarded that Microsoft's LMS tools are more robust and are utilized in many professional and corporate environments, while Google's Classroom is generally regarded as more intuitive and in line with use by primary and middle school educational environments. As the district incorporates both primary and secondary education, this leads to a difficult decision as the needs of each cohort of student by age is different. If the district is faced with choosing only one platform, the decision, in my opinion, should be weighted towards what students will likely experience as adults. Our goal, after all, is to create and foster productive adults that are as fully prepared as possible for these challenges. In terms of cost structure, it is my understanding that the district has engaged in a licensing agreement with Microsoft that extends for a period of time into the future. Given the budget deficit and the potential reduction in educational programs for next year, is it fiscally prudent for this body to incur duplicative expenses for an item that is already contracted? Furthermore, the district has invested funds for training on Microsoft's LMS platform, has dedicated staff time to learn this system to facilitate online learning, and has had staff develop content structured for the existing LMS. Is it fiscally prudent to discard this sunk cost in workforce hours, this sunk cost in training expense, and this sunk cost in content creation during a time period where educational programs are to be cut? Does the proposed change provide a data-driven quantitative increase in productivity over the existing LMS? In terms of our students, they have been asked over the last 3 months to adopt many different platforms, some district supported and some put together by staff on an ad hoc basis to meet online learning needs. Students have had to work through technical issues of these platforms, have had to manage their academics in spite of this change, and in large part has risen to the challenge presented to them. Does the current recommendation by the district's technology committee account for the duplication of a learning curve that students have just completed and the potential for fatigue and burnout from having to do it all over again? In each of the above 3 viewpoints, preparation for adult life, fiscal prudence, and emotional wellness, the analysis leans toward the maintenance of the existing LMS. I hope the board and administration will seriously consider these viewpoints as they contemplate the district's course of action on this matter. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Perfect timing. Okay, I was trying to, perfect. All right, so that was exactly 3 minutes. Okay, so then next one.
Next one, this is from Lisa C. Doren. Google Classroom versus Teams. Please make a decision that allows access to other platforms and apps like Turnitin.com, Flipgrid, and the chosen platform must sync with Aries rosters and gradebooks. A unilateral decision was made about this previously and has created so much more work for students and teachers. Your only purpose behind this decision is the expedient access of information and grades. If you do not know what works in a classroom to make these things happen and how they work together, your decision is short-sighted. Either platform is fine, but it must sync with Aries rosters and gradebook. Licensing fees are also important. Teams is already licensed, Google Classroom is not. Please choose and let teachers know so they can prepare appropriately. We have been in the dark ages and double and bookkeeping for years now. Every other district in California licensed Google Classroom and had IT connected to Aries. You must make school virtually accessible for everyone. Okay, this next one is from Linda Kurt. Today, we members of the Peninsula Math Department would like to bring your attention to areas of concern regarding the selection of a learning management system, LMS, to be implemented across the entire district. It is our understanding that the choice is being made between Microsoft Teams, currently in use, and Google Classroom. It is also our understanding that the PVPUSD Technology Advisory Committee will be making the recommendation to make a change from Microsoft Teams to Google Classroom. Before making this decision, we encourage you to look more closely at Microsoft Teams and ultimately continue to support Microsoft Teams as the recommended platform. As a district, we have been using Microsoft products for years, and with the quick shift to online learning, had the Microsoft Teams platform available. Our math department quickly moved our virtual classroom to Teams and have been very pleased with the experience. Our students currently use Teams to join live class meetings, submit assignments, take quizzes, take surveys, communicate via direct chat, and have had written and breakout room discussions while our teachers orchestrate this, record live meeting sessions, and connect with outside resources. Yes, this is all done within the Teams platform. Teams has the tools we need to provide the safe, connected online environment we need. Google Classroom is argued to be more user-friendly. This may benefit our elementary population, but we ultimately need to prepare students for the working world post-K-12 education. Through discussion with business executives and working professionals outside education, we found Microsoft and Teams to be the go-to platform. It would be a disservice to our student population to not prepare them for this future. Additionally, Google Classroom can be easily run through the Teams platform. However, the reverse is not a possibility. Microsoft Teams also has many features to support our special needs populations. One of these is the automatically integrated immersive reader, which allows for font size increase, reads text out loud, and offers a picture dictionary. This tool will be invaluable moving forward with the state's new ELD requirements. Google Classroom does not have this feature without downloading additional add-ons provided by Microsoft. With a switch to Google Classroom, the district would be supporting 2 systems. The staff and students would need to manage Microsoft accounts as well as Google accounts, which could lead to much confusion. This could also incur additional financial resources in a time when the budget is in a critical situation. It is also perceived that Google Sheets will seamlessly import a Microsoft Word document, but we can assure you that when it comes to math equations, it most definitely does not. In fact, to type math equations into a Google form, a $100 per person license add-on is required. Google currently has integration with Aries. This integration, however, is not dynamic or real-time. It requires a manual export and import by the teacher. It is our understanding that Microsoft is working on something more sophisticated to seamlessly integrate with Aries. There are many other features that Teams provides that Google doesn't. We would be happy to
Okay.
provide additional.
Sorry, that's 3 minutes.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so thank you very much. Why
Okay.
don't you do do you want to do the last sentence that just says who it's from on that one?
All the names?
Well, yeah, just so we know who that came from.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for your consideration. Emily Melquist, Brian Holtz, Michelle Slattery, Jeff Frankwick, Linda Kurt, Monica Rudder, Jackie O'Payne, Henry Chu, Francisco Aguilar, Michael Bird, Kay Bijian, John Buddha, Glenn Van Eck, Chris Kim, Bararat Cheyenne, sorry, Melanie Gerling, and Keelan Tran. I'm sorry if I mispronounced anyone's names. I apologize.
All right, next one.
Okay. This is from Logan Chutel. I am a social studies teacher at Peninsula High School, and I would prefer to use Google Classroom instead of Microsoft Teams. Google Classroom is incredibly more intuitive for teachers and students than Teams. I informally surveyed my students, and almost all of them responded that they do not like using Teams. This is from Jonathan Stamper. I am currently studying at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and we all are successfully conducting classes using the Microsoft Teams site. Seems foolproof and well tested and easy to use. I do not see a reason why going to another platform will be helpful, except for maybe security reasons. And this one is from Monica Rudder. Are you ready with the timer? This one might be 3 minutes, but it might be a little shorter if you want the timer for this one.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just saying this one is probably less than 3 minutes, but I'm not sure if you want your timer for this one.
Yeah, sorry, I was coughing. Okay,
No, it's okay.
I'm ready.
Yeah, so this one's Monica Rudder. Regarding the PVPUSD Tech Committee's recommendation to switch to Google Classroom, one, high school teachers, a large portion of our population, were underrepresented on the district committee. The needs of high school students and teachers are vastly different than those of elementary school teachers. Two, some say Google is a better product for sure. Those of us who have used the Microsoft platform from day one have found Microsoft tools to be superior to existing Google tools. Additionally, though Microsoft is a newer player in the education game, it is consistently proven to roll out more secure, more feature-rich, and ease of use products. Consider the forerunner of these tools, the Microsoft OneNote class notebook. Google has nothing like it. We tried, but could not find any app that comes close. Students are provided a personal workspace, a content library for handouts, a collaboration space for lessons and creative activities. Students take responsibility for their own learning easily and stress-free. Teachers distribute assignments and resources to each student's notebook at the click of a button. Parent access to the class content library, vital for our special needs students. Parents can easily support their students. Embedded immersive reader, used by many ELD students, not available in Google Apps. 3, Google is the old standard. It has simplicity in its favor. However, Teams is growing by leaps and bounds. Its functionality already surpasses that of Google. We want our students to be on the cutting edge with these feature-rich, up-to-date tools. Teams' seamless integration is superior to Google. Microsoft Teams' sophistication and design allows teachers to access features from multiple locations within Teams. For example, teachers can create a Microsoft quiz from within a post, chat, class notebook, etc. A Microsoft quiz can be integrated into a lesson video for immediate formative assessment. Please do not take the Teams' superior feature-rich tool away in favor of simplicity. We learned how to use this cutting-edge tool. We can help our colleagues feel comfortable with it as well. 5, if the purpose of switching is to decrease the cost, some thoughts. The switch from Microsoft to G Suite will require data integration. This switch will involve syncing all of our data with Google. This is not a trivial task. Security cost. To have the security that would be consistent with the Microsoft platform is not free with Google. The extra security is not part of the free package. It is a user-based license. Google Classroom will incur a cost after September 30th for our premium features, which are required for us to provide a high-class education to all. In conclusion, we ask the board to consider these points in their decision regarding Microsoft Teams versus Google Classroom. Thank you for your consideration, PVPHS Math Department. Okay, and I have let's see, a couple more.
Okay.
Okay, this one is from Brian Bowles. My name is Brian Bowles, and I am a teacher at Peninsula High School. I am advocating for Google Classroom over Microsoft Teams. I have been to OneNote and Team session over the past couple of years and a session this spring. Microsoft was clunky and difficult to navigate. I am middle of the road in terms of tech abilities, so maybe I am a case similar to what many teachers experience in terms of adopting a new platform. My sister showed me the basics of Google Classroom, and I felt like I could grasp it and I could use it to learn. I could learn to use it in 15 minutes. It is similar to Edmodo. I would prefer Google Classroom for ease of use, the ability to link with Aries, the communication aspect with parents and students via emailing through Aries, and overall the ease of use, seamless, is the reason it should be used over Teams. I understand many of my colleagues have been training on Teams. I think we should have a long-term view. And overall ease of use, seamless, is the reason it should be used over Teams. Regardless, I will make either platform work the district chooses, but if I had to choose, I would use Google Classroom. The strongest argument is that Teams is what teachers have trained on. If that is the strongest argument and there's a better platform for us, we need to give Google Classroom a look. Thank you.
Okay.
This one is from Maria McLeod. Dr. Chernus and school board members, I understand the district is currently considering which digital platform to recommend between Microsoft Teams and Google Classroom. Though both have many similarities, I urge you to closely examine what differentiates them. Both provide options for the delivery of online learning, allowing the distribution of materials online, working on materials in real time, creating interactive content, offering enhanced support for students in need, and offering communication abilities. Though I have not worked with Google Classroom, our district currently offers its employees Microsoft Teams, which has proven invaluable as teachers made the sudden shift to remote learning literally overnight. I hear people say Teams is not as intuitive as Google Classroom. However, with a bit of guidance, navigation of Teams is very accessible. The advantages of Teams, though they may sound minute, are worth considering. First, Teams seamlessly integrates with Microsoft Office, allowing for ease in editing in browser as well as desktop apps, whereas with Google, Microsoft versions of documents must be converted to Google Docs and then downloaded back to Microsoft formats for desktop use or sharing, sometimes causing inconsistencies in the document. Second, Microsoft is industry standard. Use of this platform will prepare our students for the work of the world, as the majority of businesses still run Microsoft. If we maintain the Microsoft platform, we will provide our students with tech experience that they will use in the working world, and isn't our job to adequately prepare them for the work ahead? Finally, the integration of the class OneNote, the digital notebook, is a superb feature of Microsoft Teams. Students, teachers, and administration can compile notes, documents, and projects in a single online location with accessibility on any connected device. I can envision moving to blended classroom learning now that we've experienced this remote teaching experience, and this digital notebook will provide a key resource. In these 11 weeks since we switched to remote learning, Microsoft Teams has proven vital to continuing the education of my students, and I've only just begun to tap into its resources. Please, I urge you to not make any hasty decisions, despite the fact that I, along with my colleagues in the district, are anxious to know what platform will be recommended so we can spend time planning and preparing for the unknown future. Please take time to fully examine and understand the options before making a choice. And that was, Maria McLeod, English teacher at Penn High. And the last one This is from Cynthia Croft, PVPHS. I am a teacher at PVPHS along with my students using Teams since the stay-at-home order. Regardless of that platform, it is important, regardless of what platform, it is important to devote time for intensive tech boot camp to ensure students and teachers are fluent in the skills and resources decided upon. Keyboarding skills and online competency, example, how to access school resources, awareness of resources available through school portal, presentation software, reliable research sources, etc., should be addressed. How can we expect students to be successful if we don't teach them the tools and how to use them? Also, reliable, robust internet at home is not available to all students and staff. Metering of service adds additional level of difficulty. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so Megan, I know you're going to report on what the committee talked about in their report, and I think then Trent is going to weigh in. But let me do this. Let's back up for a sec and ask our student board members what experience they've had with Google Classroom or Teams, if they have any input. I think it's important we make a good decision for our teachers, but we need to make a decision that our students are going to actually use. So if you don't have to, weigh in on this, but since you're here and you're still here, I'm very impressed. It's 8 o'clock. If you have anything that you would like to share with us regarding either platform, I would like to hear it.
I personally don't have any experience with either platform, so.
Really? You haven't had to use Google Classroom or any of Teams or any of those? You've used only Zoom?
Yeah, I've only used Zoom.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't have any experience with Google Classroom, but a few of my classes use Teams. And I can say personally, there was a little bit of a learning curve, as in the first few times using it, it was a little bit difficult to kind of figure out the organization of everything. But my teachers did a pretty good job of kind of explaining exactly how things are formatted and where things were set up. So now it's pretty easy to use, and it's nice because everything is kind of on one platform. So we can video conference and turn in homework and turn in assignments and kind of receive materials all on that Teams platform. I don't have any experience with Google Classroom though, so.
Okay, are you using, well, it makes sense that you wouldn't have any much experience with Google Classroom because we are not supposed to be using it, so that would make sense, right? But I know some teachers that actually do use Google Classroom anyway. But I was going to ask you, Suraj, so do you use the Teams video tool? You don't use Zoom?
Yeah, so in one of my classes, actually 2 of my classes use Teams. So for one of the classes, we video conference on Teams, and the other class we use Zoom. And he posts information on Teams.
Okay, so you have teachers using both. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay,
so Suraj, so you have that experience of both Zoom and Teams for the video conference. What are your thoughts in terms of how it works for you guys on those 2 classes?
Honestly, I'd say that they're pretty comparable. The nice thing about Zoom is that you can actually see all of the students' faces at the same time with this gallery view. I'm not sure whether there's the same functionality with Teams, but in both for my teachers, there's been a lot of screen sharing, and both of the platforms support that. So
good. Great. Okay. Serena, did you have any experience with Google Classroom or Teams that you wanted to share with us?
I actually didn't. I have been using Zoom with I'm taking one class, or this past semester took one class. So that was an interesting transition. But yeah, again, we just use Zoom for our class meetings.
I'd like to ask Trent to weigh in on this one, since he has a lot of experience with Teams and actually with both. So Trent,
right. I want Trent to weigh in too. Do we want to have Megan do her report before Trent, or does it matter? Because Megan hasn't done her report yet.
It's your call. I can wait. I'll defer to Ms. Crawford, and then I'll chime in.
Okay. I mean, I think maybe we forgot because I had her to read all those comments, and that wasn't her report. Yeah. So, okay. Can you do your report, Megan?
Yeah, I'll go quickly, and then Trent, you can chime in with the more details that you have. So really in the Friday letter, Trent really covered all of it, but for everyone at home, we had the Tech Advisory Committee meeting last week. We had over 50 participants, which was awesome. So many people were joining in. And I think the main, one of the main goals of the meeting was to, of course, come up with some consistency for both teachers and students with a learning management system. We want to be able to streamline the process and also be fiscally responsible, especially during this time. We talked a little bit about the differences as we kind of discussed last meeting, the differences between like areas, like where the student information kind of belongs with student info, scheduling, tracking, etc. EdLeo, that would be like the school's web page or teacher websites that people use in the single sign-on portal, and those are all great things that are needed. And then as far as the learning management systems, that's where the collaboration comes into place between teachers and students, and where resources can be posted in a convenient location for students to access, as well as turn in work. So some examples of that are Blackboard, Canvas, Google Classroom, and Microsoft Teams. Blackboard and Canvas can be used in higher ed and Canvas K through 12. But we were mainly looking at the difference between Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams, and that's where the discussion kind of took place. So there was a lot of good discussion among teachers. You know, the outcome of the discussion was voting for Google Classroom as like kind of a majority, again, coming from the people who were at that meeting. And that was for a variety of reasons, some of which you heard from the comments, like ease of use, thinking about what would work best for all grade levels, K through 12, and not just the Microsoft level. So some people were saying that Microsoft might be too complicated for the elementary and middle school, and Google Classroom might be more accessible to all grade levels. It's more user-friendly. Again, this is coming from the committee. These are not like my comments. This is from the committee. Also, the committee was concerned about a long-term solution, and we should be making this decision based on the long-term and not necessarily just the last 2 months of training. And again, the Microsoft Teams was handed down to the teachers to use, and whether they potentially had a choice between Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams, maybe we would have seen some differences of opinion, right? We don't know. But that's the platform that they were given, that they were trained on, and so that's their knowledge. Some teachers do have Google Classroom familiarity due to like them teaching in another place or knowing friends or family members that teach in another district and they've showed them Google Classroom. So it's interesting to hear from those teachers, seeing both sides and what they preferred. But some concerns, if Google Classroom were to be chosen, were one, transferring materials over from OneDrive to Google, and Trent can address that, but that seemed to be something that's doable. And then the main important thing is professional development for teachers. It would be important that if we decided on that now, like the committee said, whatever is decided, that they need PD now, but also especially going into the summer, so that we can be ready and teachers and students can be ready in the fall with that chosen platform. And also they wanted the ability to collaborate with teachers from other districts on those platforms, which I think would be great, especially with coming up in the summer, can talk to other teachers. So yeah, it came down to Google Classroom for them, but Trent, if you'd like to go into more detail with that.
Sure. I think Ms. Crawford kind of did a nice summary of all the issues that we discussed. We had a great turnout at the advisory committee, I think the largest ever in all my years here. So obviously people are very passionate about the discussion, have opinions. Both platforms have a lot of similarities. They have the video features, they have the collaboration tools. I think one thing that somebody pointed out that is still not quite there yet from Microsoft, which they promised, is the integration with the Aries gradebook. And from my perspective, I think that's a big piece that our teachers will be concerned about. Microsoft has shared with us that it is in development. That is on the Microsoft side, that's not on the Aries side. So Aries is waiting for them to implement that. Currently, Google already has had that. Both of them have rostering capabilities, but the direct integration into the gradebook is something that Google is further along and actually has and ready to turn up whenever, if we were to go in that direction. So that is something to consider for our staff. The other piece I think that several people pointed out is that whatever the solution we are looking at is, we want to have it address and meet the needs of all of our teachers and all of our students across the entire all grade levels. So for comparison or some ideas of how other districts handle this, I think it's important to know that many districts, unified districts, K-12, do use Google at both elementary, intermediate, and high school. There are some districts that that are starting to use Teams. The other question that often came up during our conversation was, if we were to go to a Google Classroom as a LMS learning management system, what would happen to our Microsoft platform? I think what people are a little bit concerned about is am I going to lose access to things like Excel and Word and PowerPoint? And the answer is no. What Google Classroom and Teams are is they give us the ability to collaborate between teachers, students, and parents. There is a parent component that both platforms offer that you can get updates and kind of see what's happening in the classroom. So from an operational, or what I like to refer to as an enterprise standpoint, the Microsoft resources that we use and license, everything from our server licenses, our Windows operating systems, Office 365, email, and things like Excel, PowerPoint, the Office suite. There's both the actual applications that are installed on desktops as well as the online 365 version, which is a little bit similar to kind of the G Suite of online applications. Exactly what Ms. Crawford mentioned is the comments from staff who are familiar with it, who either have children in other districts that are using it, or who are have family members or spouses that have used the Google Classroom. People are very comfortable with it. So I would say that Google has been in the market space for education quite a bit longer in terms of classroom collaboration versus Microsoft. Microsoft is developing that. Teams is a very powerful tool that a lot of business and corporate clients have used and adopted. So where Google Classroom is kind of built a little more directly for education, the Teams platform has found a niche with education. And that's why I think you're seeing some of the development still ongoing with some of the tools and integration with other platforms. So what we try to do is really get some input from all levels, all stakeholders, from elementary level to intermediate to high school. One of the things that people expressed concern is if I've been learning, gone to professional development classes over the past couple months or even before that, there's always a concern is that those efforts are wasted. And what I've shared with several people is I think what we're doing is they're so similar that the skill set of what you're learning, everything from video conferencing to collaboration to sharing assignments, turning in assignments, allowing students to collaborate together, a lot of the features are very similar. The challenge we always have is learning how to navigate and how to do something in a different platform. I often refer to, instead of using a red pen, we're using a blue pen, but this is a little bit more advanced because we have to spend the time to provide professional development and training and show people how do we now navigate those tools and those platforms. So with that, just to summarize real quickly, what we try to do is build consensus from the group, and that's kind of how the recommendation came to Google Classroom. from the Tech Advisory Committee. And as President Seymour said earlier, some questions came out, what are the next steps? And what I shared with the group was that the Tech Advisory Committee, their role is not to make decisions, it's to provide recommendations and feedback to the Board of Education. The couple of things to clarify is that Google Classroom does not require a licensing subscription type of agreement that you might have with another software platform, such as a traditional learning management system where it's fee-based. Google Classroom, Mr. Brock was on the committee last year. We started looking at having some discussion about piloting. We actually were ready to start piloting, and some teachers were in that phase when the closure hit. So rather than, and several teachers asked us if they could start using Google Classroom, and what we really didn't want to do was provide a lot of confusion for parents to have them have another thing to go and log in and learn in a short amount of time, as well as students. So that was why we paused, and at the direction of the board, I think the concerns that our community and many of our stakeholders have shared is we really want to see some consistency and kind of a uniform solution across all grade levels for children that are in, many families have children in elementary, intermediate, and high school, and they're matriculating all the way through our system. So talking with some of our neighboring districts that have used the Google Classroom platform, the continuity, the ease of use for that, consistency has been a positive for them. So the next step for the board would be to, provide guidance to staff in terms of, is it something that you would like to see agendized at the next meeting? What we are concerned, and Dr. Gotanda can chime in on this too, is looking ahead to distance learning for the fall. I think everyone agrees, no matter what we do, professional development is probably the biggest component that we want to address, regardless of what direction we head in, because the time we're already, we can count the number of weeks till we return, to whatever we return looks like. But I think the distance learning component, staff is really hungry to make sure that they are prepared and able to adapt to whatever the direction that we settle on.
So can I just add a couple things too? I think, like Suraj and Lucy and Serena shared, a lot of them are using Zoom, but Zoom was provided to school districts during this time and it was free. And we don't necessarily know if it's going to continue to be free. So it actually is a relatively pricey platform if we were to go by user. And then the other thing that I just wanted to add related to Google Classroom, we've never engaged in any of this with our publishers because we aren't a Google district, but many of our adopted curriculums actually, they sync with Google. So for example, Wonders at the elementary level fully integrates with Google Classroom, as does our math curriculum, Math in Focus. Our most recent science adoption from our last meeting, FOSS, also integrates with Google. So there's a lot of advantages, I think, for our teachers who are using our adopted curriculums if we're able to do that. And then additionally, as I've been looking at other online curriculum providers, looking at possibility for reopening in the fall, many of them also have a Google Classroom link that if we did not have a learning management system like Google Classroom, we would not be able to utilize those features.
So say Math in Focus and a few of those others, they don't connect with the Microsoft platform at all?
No, so as a result, I think what many of our teachers have done, and to no fault of their own, but when they assign different things to the kids, either they have to do it in that particular app through the single sign-on portal, or they're assigning things and parents are having to print out the worksheets. I heard from one parent who said they're printing upwards of 50 to 90 sheets a week, having their student do that stuff, and then they have to take pictures of it and scan it back. So this really would kind of ease some of that for both the kids and the parents, I think, in addition to our teachers to be able to assign those things very seamlessly and then receive that work back digitally if we were to be in a situation where we cannot actually have, in-person collection of work.
Okay.
Let me also add that I know that a concern that some teachers expressed was they've learned how to use tools such as Flipgrid, Kahoot, some of those other applications for collaboration with their students. Those resources all adapt to both platforms. So the learning, the professional development they've had with those is not wasted. They'll be able to easily apply those skill sets to both platforms.
And I think the other thing, and I think this is where Suraj, Serena, and Lucy can jump in. I think we are not incorrect in saying that you guys have been using a lot of different applications to get access to your work. Is that accurate from our high school friends?
Yeah, I would say that I'm in a pretty lucky situation. I think my classes have just lined up conveniently that a lot of it is on Zoom and Edmodo, but I do have a younger sister who's a freshman, and we've talked about how frustrating it is for her to be using a lot of different platforms, just kind of because teachers prefer one over the other. So I know that can be frustrating for her.
Yeah, same here. Most of my work is assigned on Microsoft Team or Edmodo. So, and we also use Zoom sometimes. So there are inconsistencies among different teachers, just based preferences.
And I think our goal, obviously, from Ed Services, working in collaboration with IT is obviously to train our teachers, but also train our kids so that they aren't experiencing all of these different platforms. And, I do understand from a teacher perspective preference, but I also know that, it's hard for kids, right? And it's, we're talking to Suraj and Lucy and Serena, who are really some of our top kids. But I also think when kids are younger, and they have less developed executive functioning, I think that it is more difficult for them, and it does require more parental guidance and leads to frustration.
Serena, in your experience?
Oh, I was just gonna say, for me right now, I'm using Canvas through my course through West LA College, but I would definitely say, like, in the past, and I've heard from a lot of my friends who are going through this obviously right now too. It is like, it's just an extra unnecessary step. So I feel like if people are already, it's like harder to be motivated, especially during this time, to like find all your work and get get your brain together and get your work together. Because we don't have that like day-to-day instruction. So I think, yeah, when it is kind of more spread out, it definitely makes it more difficult.
So, President Seymour, if I could just weigh in on this, I think this is something we could talk about at length. It's good we're having this dialogue, but I think we need some concrete, next steps. What does the board want us to do here? There's a recommendation from this committee as far as next steps, so we can maximize our use of time and not just talk around something, for meeting and not get to where, a targeted endpoint, I guess.
Okay. But I guess this really was agendized as a report from the committee,
right?
Through the rep. And so I think what the proper process would be, just like we have the BAC presenting their recommendation later on the agenda, would be to have the TAC, I don't even know who the chair and co-chair are of the TAC, present their formal report to us. And then agendize it and through there have the discussion of what we want to do going forward.
Yeah, I don't know that it's organized. Yeah, it's not, I don't think, Rick, it's organized the same way. I think Megan is the reporter back to us from the tech advisory, because it's not run by parent volunteers like the BAC. Trent, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it is, though.
On the curriculum one, which I think Lindsay runs, right? On the curriculum advisory, you run that?
There's no longer curriculum advisory.
Okay, well, it was a staff-run committee, but still, I still think it was the staff, presented a formal recommendation presentation, and that teed off the discussion to then get direction.
Right. Well, tonight what I was planning on doing was listening to the report and then making this and first of all, I want to thank the Tech Advisory Committee. I've been on that committee before for a while, and I know Linda was too. I think we've all been on that committee, and I'm actually really pleased that they have had such great attendance, and that they came to a solution that they, are behind. So I want to thank them for that work, and I want to honor all that work. And I think what we need to do, because we've had this conversation, it's actually on our future agenda items list at the end of our meeting to discuss a learning management system. So I think we need to actually agendize a more concrete conversation as to how we would move forward if we want to make a change. I don't know if we want to make a change. I don't know if we do or we don't. I have no idea. But I think that we all have quite a few questions, and maybe it would make sense, before we ask our millions of questions, to ask Trent to summarize some of the pros and the cons and really lay out for us the financial pieces involved in making any kind of decision, including what does it cost to transfer data and to do that piece if we made a change. We have always been an outlier in that we are doing Microsoft. Most people have been using Google Classroom. So me personally, I don't have one way or the other. I want to do what everybody wants our kids to have. Clearly, we have teachers who have learned to use Microsoft and actually think it's great. But I think that given all that we've heard tonight, and Trent, you have all the public comments we've gotten, and obviously you staff that committee. So I think the board would benefit from not so much maybe a recommendation from you, but maybe you and Lindsay can get together and really figure out the pros and the cons and how we would actually make a change if we wanted to make a change. And we can agendize that for the next meeting. We can always say it's too hard to make a change, but actually, one day if we decide we want to do that, we will have to figure it out. I think everybody who's employed will learn to use new software for the rest of their life. That's not going to change, right? So we're all going to be using different things all the time. That's just how it works. Look, we're all using Zoom today, and we didn't even use that really 3 months ago. So Trent, can you do that? And then maybe we can have that conversation at the next meeting. Because if we want to make a change, if we feel the need to make a change, we're going to have to make that decision quickly and decide to go that way. And I know we pay already for Microsoft, and we've already done that for the year. So let's just hear a more concrete, proposal on what the entire thing would entail. Does anybody?
I can put that all together. I think there's a lot of questions and uncertainty that people have. I think that would be helpful to all our stakeholders who express concerns. Everything from how do you transfer data to, what features am I going to have? Am I going to lose something? I think there's we can provide that information, outline it very, very clearly for everyone, because I do think there's some anxiety about a shift of losing some of the features, especially even some of the things that some of our math folks mentioned. One of the things we have to remember is that the Microsoft Teams is not a separate add-on cost. So regardless of something to consider, and some of the access to features that people like for things like pivot tables in Excel or other Microsoft products, those will still be available to folks. We're not going to remove those. The key for folks to remember is the collaboration, kind of the hub for everything we're doing in the classroom, would be specifically to one of those products, either Google Classroom or Teams. So I think that will help clarify what people, knowing what would be different from their experience, and then also what the experience is from the parents and from the students. So Lindsay and I will walk through all that for you, agendize that for the next meeting, and also touch base with the board to make sure that there's anything we've left out or missed.
And I think everybody on the board, if you have a list of specific questions that you already know, send the list that you have so that Trent can answer those or Lindsay can answer those, and we can get those, kind of lined up in advance. And then we will do this again at our next meeting and see what we do.
Trent, if I can just ask, when you do this, provide a timeline as far as when you would expect this to roll out, how long the rollout process would take before we're able to get everybody on the same page.
Okay, yeah, I can put together a timeline. I think you'd be surprised how quickly we can turn something.
Thanks, Trent.
if we want to do that, that'd be great. So let's put that on the agenda for the 9th. And again, anybody on the board has questions, please direct them to either Lindsay or Trent or both, so they can answer those in advance, and then we will go from there.
My only request is just to send us some kind of information, because here, all that's listed on the agenda is report from Tech Advisory Committee. So teachers that knew we were having this report knew how to respond. I don't even know what to ask questions of. I need to see some kind of comparison of cost, features, what's best for what grade level, you know, whatever the staff thinks, but it's hard to even know what I'm asking for when I don't have anything to see, if that makes sense.
Right. I know. And Linda, I had that same, but on this item, I just want to make sure you understand. I had the same question. I was like, why is everybody weighing in on this? It's only an update from the committee, because we're not on the committee. So I didn't know they had made a recommendation. Right. So I think we were all kind of surprised at the level of interest. And we're not mind readers, so we didn't know what Megan was going to say or Trent was going to say, obviously. So
I think this might be a good opportunity to look at whether or not we provide minutes for meetings. You know, we don't legally have to provide minutes for subcommittee meetings because they are reported out by board members. But perhaps we do look at having minutes so that we can see this information, you know, sooner than looking at for the first time at the board meeting.
I thought we did do something for minutes at the committee level. Jana, what do we do on the committees?
Some of our committees do minutes, but they are not legally required. So we don't do minutes for every committee.
Okay. Okay, well,
I guess that's another thing that's not standard. Just like we have multiple, computer platforms, we also have multiple, rules for the committees in terms of the minutes.
Right, but maybe that's something that we agendize to talk about. Do we want minutes for all of our committee meetings? We don't have to make that decision tonight. That's something to look at.
I will add that to my list.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. So, Linda, anything else? No. Okay. So then Trent and Lindsay, if you can help us with that for the next meeting, that would be great. All right. So moving right along, we will get now to the law enforcement meeting committee, and that's item Q. And for anybody that's expecting to be on later on in the agenda, we don't always know how the meeting's going to go. So I apologize if things are taking longer than some people were expecting. And of course, I want to make sure that the speakers we had for R6 have been told we're not going to be discussing that, so they're not waiting in the waiting room for us. I'm guessing they have been told that we're not agendizing that, or that we're not going to discuss that. So moving right along, Peninsula Law Enforcement Committee, is that Linda?
Yeah, that's me. And I just have a short report. We met a few weeks ago, and this is a committee that's representatives of the different 4 city councils around the Hill, as well as law enforcement. Talked a lot about emergency preparedness. They obviously talked a lot about COVID. They didn't talk too much about the schools. Their one request was wanting a detailed report of our school resource officers, which we have now provided them the report that the board received last winter. They would like to be invoiced monthly. That's something that we're required to do that we hadn't been doing, so we are doing that now. And that Dr. Turnus also let the committee members know that we will not be invoicing the cities for the school resource officers from March 15th to the end of the school year. And they appreciated that as well. It's a great group. Mayor Pro Tem Alegria is the chair of that group, and we'll continue to meet a couple months from now. So if anyone has any particular concerns in this area, to let me know, and that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So
okay.
Linda, is there anything that we need to do in terms of relations with the city to make sure that everything gets funded next year for the SROs?
Yeah, I met with the city managers and we're working on an agreement. We should be getting that in June.
Great.
Thanks.
Very good. Okay, so are we good to move on to R1, Budget Advisory Committee recommendations regarding Board Policy Regulation 3100?
We should be having two folks joining us, our wonderful co-chairs of the Budget Advisory Committee.
I think one is maybe not available now. I think, yeah.
Teresa and Bruce, yay. Kathy, wonderful.
Kathy?
We have everybody.
Okay,
so
great.
Just to kind of, I'm sorry.
I said great, thank you.
Just to kind of set this up a little bit, this group, or these members have been meeting for approximately 2 years now. More recently, closer to the bond, we started to talk about a reserve policy and what that would potentially look like for our district. There's obviously been discussion about an aspirational one that would cover about 2 months of our expenses at 17%. And then the minimum that would be required of our district, specific to us, would be 3%. Obviously, a lot of discussion has taken place amongst the group. We have wonderful stakeholders from each of the group, and I will hand it over to our wonderful co-chairs to present the discussions and the recommendation to the board.
Thank you, Brianna. I'm going to let Bruce do the heavy lifting on this one. Doesn't really require that we both speak, but I'm going to support his presentation here. And hopefully everyone had a chance to read the document that we included with the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Bruce.
Oh, you're welcome. And Teresa, please fact check me along the way if I make a misstatement or misrepresent something. I would want to start out and just acknowledge the folks in the committee and Brenna and Kathy, particularly folks on the board and the district administration should know they've been nothing but cooperative, supportive, enlightening at every juncture. And I don't say that, to be patronizing. They've really helped frame things and help us understand. So I just want to make sure their contributions don't go unacknowledged. This has been, as Teresa said, and I guess Brenna in the introduction, this has been a long time in coming. I think we've been wrestling with this for a while. We started out by canvassing probably 20 to 30 districts around the state, looking at their reserve policies, and probably the only conclusion is that they vary widely from non-existent to somewhat prescriptive, and I would say on average they tend to be rather vague, and at least if I were a board member I wouldn't quite know what to do with reserve policies on average that I would see in other districts. So, but we did start our frame our search there. The other thing I would want to acknowledge, and it seems when we look at those policies such as they are, that accounting terms are pretty fluid from one district to the next. One will refer to a reserve policy, another one will call it a fund balance, another one will call it, so you have to be careful, I think, and I would certainly defer to those of you on the screen who know more about this than I do, certainly. And I think Teresa would agree. We just want to make sure that whatever is done, that the language is transparent and consistent throughout, if any document is to be adopted. And then lastly, and this is a personal one, I just know, we started this exercise when it was a bit more of a philosophical undertaking, and here we are, a couple months later, and I don't know whether it makes this undertaking more urgent or resembles more of, an exercise in something that should be a subordinate consideration. It's just so hard to know. But all that said, let me jump in. If you have a copy of the document, there are 4 sections here. The first section, the background section, just does that. It sets the table to try and make sure everybody was operating on the same level, whether it's someone who's from the outside looking in or whether it's someone who's intimately acquainted with all the details. So we relied, if you look at the footnotes at the bottom, we drew heavily upon language and ideas that we saw, whether it was from the Legislative Analyst's Office or the CDE or the CCR, or I think there was one other source that's floating around in my head, I can't remember, Department of Education, if I didn't mention that. So we tried where appropriate to make sure that that language was acknowledged or recognized so that people would understand we weren't just operating kind of whimsically without a foundation beneath us. In that second paragraph of the first background section, you see just an acknowledgement of the landscape that, you know, districts are by law, by state law, required to keep a reserve anywhere from 1% to 5%, depending upon their population size, their enrollment. And for a district of our size, we're required to maintain a minimum of 3%. And then the particular definitions of that requirement are spelled out there, and those are taken again directly from the California Department of Education and the CCR. So we just wanted to acknowledge that. At the same time, we also acknowledged, and when we first came on the committee, we heard a lot of discussions about 2 months, which is approximately 17%. And it was a little bit later on in our tenure on this, and frankly, for me, too late. I mean, I feel foolish for not having understood or asked more questions, but that apparently, from what I can tell, and I think Teresa would agree, comes from the Government Finance Officers Association, which is it doesn't appear to speak to school districts per se. It's sort of a broad-based, broad brush, quote unquote, best practice for any government body. And again, that was acknowledged that they refer to general purpose government. So that's not specifically school districts, but could be. And they recommend a best practice of 17%. So we felt it was important to acknowledge that kind of the range that we're seeing that we have to work with, from 3% mandated at a minimum to 17%, which I think, as Brenda said, is kind of an aspirational target. The second section of the rationale and purpose, we thought that, you know, a policy like this, if it serves any functions, it ought to be that it provides an early warning system, whether it's to this current board and superintendent or folks 10 years out who are new to this, to recognize when they could potentially be approaching a threshold that they should be sit up and take notice, an early warning system. And in the same fashion, not only just an early warning system, but somehow prescribes a course of action, something that should be done to recognize, you know, where they're heading. So if you go to the third section, the description section, again, that returns to the language from the CDE about the 3 components of a reserve as they define them. And then we arrived at the final paragraph, which probably took the most, back and forth with committee members and so forth. But we just finally said, and spells it out here, thought maybe a minimum initial reserve of 10%. And as we said there, that's simply that there's nothing magic in that 10%. It's the halfway point between the 3% prescribed at the state level and the 17% aspirational target. We thought, well, you know, absent any great wisdom on our part, that seems to recognize a compromise between the practical challenges of trying to maintain that higher reserve level with the I don't want to say threat, but the 3%, nobody wants to go there. So we thought somewhere in between the sweet spot is we just hung our hat on 10, add 17 and 3 divide by 2, and there we are. Again, and I think Teresa may want to speak to this if I don't explain it well, but Teresa and I, as we listened to people and considered things, we were both struck by the comments of one of our committee members who has had extensive experience working in banking and finance, and in that arena, certainly a minimum balance, a minimum prescribed is very important in that arena. They're regulated as such, and that sort of struck a chord with us, that we felt there has to be a floor beneath which you get in trouble or need to initiate some corrective action. So that I think resonated. I think I can speak for Teresa and say that resonated with both of us strongly. Finally, under the monitoring section, again, we just acknowledged that if we are approaching a 10% threshold, that should kick off an early warning system meeting between superintendent, board, et cetera, to look at corrective actions to restore whatever is deemed a healthier level of reserves. And again, we tipped our hat to that GFOA body that said, ideally you would take corrective action that would unfold over a 1 to 3 year period. So again, having no more wisdom into the time frame for what would be appropriate, we thought we would just defer to their kind of quote unquote best practice suggestions. So that's what we came up with. It's, again, we were weighing a lot of considerations from not wanting to be too restrictive to a board. I know if I were sitting on a board, I wouldn't want to, you know, look at something that was overly complicated or restrictive if there were times when I needed to have more flexibility. Yet at the same time, we recognize there are some very kind of palpable, tangible reasons why it makes sense, you know, from a fiduciary standpoint to have something in place. So we were trying to balance a lot of considerations in coming up with this. And I've spoken too much. Teresa, please, if I've left something out or you want to amend anything, please.
I think that captures, believe it or not, several months of work. This was actually heavily debated and discussed, and a lot of information was shared. And it sounds like it came about lightly. You know, 17 plus 3, you get 10. That minimizes the amount of work that came to this number. We literally spent 6 months of discussion and reviewing other school boards with similar populations and similar high performance metrics. And so we tried to find guidelines, and we also debated aspiration. You know, do we have an aspirational number? And we decided that really wasn't where we wanted to go, especially in this environment, that we wanted a floor that would be a trigger event for discussion, and 10% seems reasonable. So again, I just want to say thanks to Bruce, who was actually the author. I was more of the editor of the final document, and that's our recommendation. So thank you. If there's any questions, I think this would probably be a good time to ask us any background or further information.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate both of you and all the work that was involved. You guys were discussing this when I was on the board a couple of years ago. So it's a lot of work, takes a long time to get to a good place, but the timing is probably perfect right now, honestly, because it needs to, we need to have the conversation. So I don't know if anybody else, I think Linda and Rick sit on this committee, if they want to add anything, or Kathy, you want to add anything before we ask questions? Brenna, I don't know, anybody?
Just for the public, I think I'd like to add, I'm sorry, one more thing. In the discussions, I can tell everybody at first interim for 1920, we were and are sitting at that point at about 15.1% in reserves. So when we were talking about the reality of whether or not we could or couldn't, achieve something, we were kind of tracking first and second interim over the years, as you mentioned, Suzanne. As we've been having the discussions, we kept on checking in with where we were. And that 15.1%, just let me also note, does not include facilities funds. So that was kind of taken out of it, since we do focus on that area with those funds. But okay, I'll leave it open to everybody else for questions or comments.
So I just want to say, I think it's great that we got there to a recommendation from the committee, because I think it's been a long journey on this. And it was something that actually got, I think, added to the committee's charter originally at the beginning of the year to come up with, or when we renewed the committee, to come up with guidance on how large a reserve, when it should be utilized, and some guidelines around it. Because I do feel like there really wasn't anything in our policies, and so I'm really glad to see it. Then it evolved to, hey, if we had this policy, it would actually help us if we passed a bond, because it would enhance our credit rating, so we could get lower cost. And then when the bond measure PV unfortunately failed to pass, the committee persevered, though, to complete this task, which I think is admirable and is necessary. And I did at one time support, and I still do for the long term, support that aspirational level of 16%, because I do think that that's the right long term goal. But given the current circumstances that we're in, and they shifted very quickly, right around I guess 10 days after the failure of Measure PV, for example, to where we are now with shutting down the schools for COVID and, in a fiscal crisis. And I do think that, having a level to where the board has to consciously say, okay, we're in an emergency level that requires even going below this minimum level, and having some sort of deliberative process around that is a good concept. And I support the committee's recommendation as is.
Okay.
I'd also like to add that, first of all, thank you, Bruce and Teresa. Just because we don't have a bond, we're now in a situation where we may have to borrow cash because the state's going to defer all the funds, and when we have to go out and borrow cash, our credit rating impacts our fees, so our interest rates. So having this policy will support our credit rating, which is good. So we're helping our financial position by having this, just by the nature of the policy. So thank you for that. Just a quick question: was there any? I thought I remember there was someone who voted no, and we don't need to. I'm curious: was there dissenting views on this that came up when and what were some of the things that others may have said that had an issue with the policy as stated?
I'll have Bruce add to this as well. The individual thought that it should be higher, so it wasn't a dissent. It was that they actually contacted Bruce and myself to provide the rationale, and they were more in line with Rick to say, I think we should go for a higher number, a more aspirational number, and that be our guide, or the board's guide rather. So it was not to have one. They thought that we were on the low side. So that was the rationale behind the no. So I don't know if Bruce wants to add to that.
The one thing I would add is, and I was trying to see if I could pull up an email from the one dissenting vote. It wasn't, as Teresa said, the member reached out within an hour of that meeting where we presented it, perhaps a week or two ago, with an email, a very respectful, thoughtful email. It wasn't, it wasn't trying to burn the house down or, throw up hands. It was just saying, here's an explanation for why. And 99% of it was just probably the target number. But I will share with you, and again, see if I can pull this up so I don't misrepresent what was said. But the person in the email said the drafting, the overall thought that, the source work and everything else, was more than he or she could have, imagined. In other words, believe strongly in the framework of what was there. It just came down to the specific number. And that's, to be honest, from where I sit, and I don't remember the final tally, 9-1, maybe 10-1, something along those lines. To get a vote that strong over something I consider to be, pretty good work. If that was the only dissent, and it was a somewhat mild dissent focused on just a singular number, but all the rest of the parameters made sense, then, I think that represents a lot of people's input and generally good work. The only other thing I would say is I've been thinking about this, and I can only equate it to, managing a household budget. We all have varying levels of, savings and such, and liquidity in our own households that we feel comfortable maintaining. And sometimes that doesn't, sometimes it takes a lot of years to find out how to run a household and what makes sense. How much do I need around to feel comfortable with? So I look at Alex and others with far more experience living with budgets and say, you have a visceral experience with living with reserve amounts that I, and certainly Teresa, just don't possess. So I respect whatever kind of visceral sense you have of what it means to live with fluctuating reserve amounts over the course of, a lot of experience. I wouldn't want to presume that our arriving at 10% is, more meaningful than what any one of you live with in terms of your jobs and positions. I want to honor that.
Well, thank you. Do we have any questions from any of our board members?
No questions, but I just want to say thank you to both of you again for coming on and giving this recommendation. I know it's been a long time coming, and it's good to hear that overall there was major consensus on this number, and it makes sense where you guys were coming from, kind of meeting in the middle. And it's also interesting that you said in your research that it's so varied over the state, but also with some districts there's not necessarily consensus or like a policy on that. So I'm glad that it seems like we are doing the right thing to have a policy in place, and thanks to Rick for advocating for that for a long time. And thank you again for putting all of your time in. And I think that to Rick's point and the other person's point about being aspirational at that 16 or 17%, I think that that's something that we could potentially look at later on. And if we get to that 10% and can hold that for a long time and don't seem to have issues, then we could revisit that in future years or something to make it go higher potentially. Or so I think it's a good baseline number, and just thank you.
I will add, and I can forward a Word document to any of you who wants to see it. It's just sort of an informal cut and paste from school districts around the state of California, probably 15 or 20 of them and I would venture to say, 90% of them, it tends to be brief, and it's boilerplate language that's seen across, almost as if there wasn't very much thought put into it originally, or hey, what's somebody else doing? They slap something in and move on. So I think what we've given you is more personalized, more tailored perhaps than what you would see if I were to send you the research, from other districts, good or bad or otherwise. That's just kind of what we would.
And it's our minimum. It's not necessarily what we're advocating for the school district. It's a trigger event. The 10% is a minimum. So if it stays at 15%, great. If you get to 16, great. But if it gets to 10, it should start a conversation quickly. That's really our intent here.
Right. Okay. I had a couple questions, but anybody else want to ask anything before I weigh in? Because obviously the 3% are required, and then we are required to do, a 3-year budget, and we do get direction from the LA County Office of Education with regard to our reporting, right? So we get that information, and we listen to what they have to say with regard to our budget and our spending. I like this in that it helps us, think through every large expenditure every time you make a big decision as to how it's really going to impact, the overall, just the health of the district. And in the kind of situation where we're in right now with where our budget's going, the more we would have in reserve, the easier it is to play out the short term while you're trying to figure out what the state's going to do with the budget, right? Which is why you want to have a reserve so that you could access it when you need it, knowing in, I don't know, Dr. Chernish, you mentioned this, I don't know if people remember, but back when we had the last recession and we were always paid late, so you had to have some money in your reserves to essentially borrow from yourself, so you didn't have to pay to go borrow from somebody else because the state pays us late sometimes. They push the money into the next year. So everything about this is great for our district, and it's interesting that we didn't have before. I'm glad we have it now. I think anybody in this room on the Zoom channel knows how hard it is to get anything done. It is slow. It's not one person makes a decision and we, get to make that choice. So I think everyone appreciates the many, many hours you guys have put into this. Can you describe for me though, in the event that we adopt this, say as is, right? And in 2 years, the 10% is not met, or even 6 months, whatever, at some point. What do you think the process is going to be at that point to alert or to make mention, or how do you anticipate that the staff rolling that out to the board?
I'm not entirely sure I'm answering the question you've asked. Are you saying what happens if we were to go below 10%?
Yeah, like
Are you?
What would you, I mean, when you adopted this and I see the monitoring piece, what do you think? Is it just going to be a conversation, or what do you think that should be? Or it's not a trigger where you ought to automatically have a across the board cut. That doesn't say that here. So I'm just curious what you think that would be with it, because I want to set something up. If we adopt this, I want to make sure something's in place so that we kind of operationalize what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think, at least from my perspective, I was, I felt it was important to not shoehorn the board without knowing what you folks know. In other words, there's latitude here. If you look, the language says the recommended minimum.
Right.
You know, so the language is qualified a bit, and it says will initially be no less than. So there's latitude there. As I said a few minutes ago, I think only those of you who live with this kind of thing more frequently and for greater time periods than we have would understand how much tighter that language should be and how much more prescriptive. If you felt, if all of you felt that it, 10% was the right floor, and that, immediately within 1 month, I mean, certainly you could add that language. I, for one, don't know how prescriptive to get.
Okay, that's fair. I don't think there's an issue necessarily. I think the 10% for me is actually a pretty good place. I would just say maybe to Kathy, maybe on our financial reporting, we have another column, right? That would say, are we in, where are we? Or you would have some mechanism to report that where we are. We already have the fund balance on the percentage, but I mean, you want this to be in your mind all the time, that that's no longer 3% as absolutely dire, that it's 10, right? So I'm just trying to think through how that would work for us. So we use it,
I'll make sure it's something that we include in any of our financial reporting presentations.
Okay.
Forward, so.
Perfect. All right. Anybody else? Anything? So this is agendized to be voted on, and I will wait and ask if we are going to have a motion from anybody to adopt it, to approve it, or make any changes.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation from the Budget Advisory Committee to adopt the 10% reserve balance policy language.
Okay.
So I have a question, I guess, a process question, which is, so normally we'd have 2 readings of a policy to bring forth, and we'd have a first reading and then a second reading. So are we adopting it straight out as is, or are we adopting this as a first reading and then bring it back for a second reading to get more public comment? I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah, you know what, you're right. This is not exactly typical of how we do our policy adoptions, to be honest. You're right. I think we could do either one. I think we can certainly call this a first read and bring it back for a second read if we want to do that. Typically we don't do a lot in the second read.
My motion is to approve it as written by the committee.
Right. So I'd have to, right. So given what Rick has just said, I mean, we can see if we have a second to adopt it tonight, or if we don't get a second, the motion will be dropped, and then we will see if we have a different motion. But it was written to adopt tonight, so maybe that was my fault because I approved this agenda item with Dr. Chernus, but I should have thought through the whole first and second thing, and I didn't do that.
So I guess, in my view, I don't think there's an urgency that we need to adopt it tonight. And so I would prefer personally that we just stick with our normal process of, having pass this on a first reading and bring it back at the next meeting for a second reading.
I agree with that. I think that also gives people an opportunity to express comments at the next board meeting. I would like to stay consistent with how we've handled these things in the past.
Okay, so I guess we will not get a second on that motion.
Well, it's up to you and Megan. So,
I mean, I don't. You know what? I don't feel like this is really that big of a deal. I think we're going to adopt it next time. That's fine if we want to give people a chance. Again, I kind of feel like this was my mistake. I should not have put it on this way.
And I guess, Dan, I don't view it as a mistake. I think the committee's worked really, really hard to get this done. I think we owe it to them to either accept their recommendation or not. And in the interest of all the million things that we're going to have to work on this summer, I prefer, that's why I made the decisions. I prefer we adopt this and honor their work, and we can get on to other things as well. Nobody's making any, there's no public comment tonight on this item. It was on the agenda, it was posted, it was as clear as could be. So I prefer that we adopt it.
Okay, fair enough. Then
Question. So to Linda's point about a lot of things that we need to do this summer, there's a lot. Would this essentially be, like if this is the first reading, the second reading would for sure be next meeting?
Yeah, that's always how we've done it. We do a first read and a second read. We generally don't have a lot of comments on a second read. We must have had at some point, but that's generally not the way it works. Generally, the comments are at the first read. And then the second read generally is part of the consent calendar.
Okay.
That's how we've done it in the past that I can recall.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I see both sides. Obviously, the committee put together a lot of work, and I would be fine either way. But I also see going with everyone else's side of doing it like we have with everything else with the 2 reads. So I guess I won't second it.
So what I'd suggest is that we adopt it as a first read, but also that we review it in the meantime, because it doesn't include the normal cross references that we'd have to our other policies and ed code that if you look at any of our policies, they cross reference other policies like the annual budgeting process, for example, here. So we probably ought to bring those comments back to second read to adopt it on second read with those amendments. So I'll make a motion that we adopt the recommendation of the BAC as a first reading of this and bring it back for a second reading to the board at the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, so for a roll call vote then, Brock?
Aye.
Crawford?
Yes.
Reed?
No.
Was that no?
Yep. No.
Okay, make
no.
Okay, making sure. Phillips?
Aye.
Seymour, aye. So that's 4-1. And so don't feel like we didn't appreciate your work. We will approve it at the next meeting. And I do get Linda's point. I also do get the fact that I feel like I should know more about our practices and not put things on, or at least have asked that question of myself or Dr. Chernus, and I did not. So I really think that's on me. So we will put it on for a second read next meeting, and it'll be in consent unless we have a reason not to. And I do think it makes sense for it to look more like our other board policy that we adopt. So, all right, so that's 4-1. Now moving on to R2, memorandum on late certificated layoffs.
Are we dismissed?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for waiting. I know these meetings are long.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Stay well.
I should have told them they don't need to come to the next meeting. Okay, so I think this is Dr. Horvath.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Board President. What you have here, board members, is memorandum of late certificated layoffs. This comes from the Office of General Counsel from Los Angeles County Office of Education. We just wanted to put it on your radar while it's up for discussion action. I don't necessarily think we are ready for action at this point in time, but we wanted to put it on the board's radar for the kind of, it guides and gives the outlines of a lesser known layoff period. So with the looming budget cuts and the state of where we're at with our government and funding, what triggers this second round of layoffs is if the district's total revenue limit increase this budget year is less, or it's 2% or less over the prior year. So what we would want to consider is this late certificated layoff period, which is August 15th. So we always think of the March 15th layoff period. If it's 2% or less, that triggers this little lesser known. So what you have here, it gives us the outline. It's very similar or pretty much the same as the March 15th process, except I would say it's a far more expedited process. So when we do March layoffs, we're preparing for those layoffs well in advance. And at this point in time, we are making lots of considerations, obviously, for potential reductions. But in March 15th, we trigger those at that point in time, and you have it until about the period of May 15th. So it's about a 2-month period. And again, a lot of that work starts before. So we've already thinking about potential layoffs or potential reductions that we may need to make. But what happens here is ultimately when the Budget Act is passed, at that point in time, that triggers this process. So we'll have about 45 days to go through the process. So at this point in time, we're making considerations. And once we see what that budget is, we've seen from the May revise, those numbers are devastating. Hopefully we get better news as we move along. But we are making preparations, and we want the board to know what this process looks like. So really between the end of June through August 15th, this process needs to take place and be done.
And so if I can add, the LA County Office of Education put this out to all districts a few weeks ago. And so this is an education piece for our school board and for our community. As Dr. Horvath mentioned, there has to be a financial revenue depletion of over 2%. And so we don't even know if this is applicable. Given the governor's proposal, it would be. Today we got better news of a counter proposal from the state assembly. And as I mentioned before, state Senate yesterday. So this is just on the radar as something that is going to be a consideration for school districts, potentially if it's legally feasible to do, and if our budget warrants it.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Do we have any questions or comments from anyone?
Yeah. Go ahead. I was just going to ask on timing. When would we have this resolution on the agenda? When would we need to adopt it?
We do the resolution in July, likely.
Okay, because it says we have to reserve dates for due process hearings at the same time or prior to the time that we adopt the resolution.
Yeah.
So I guess my other question is, can we do what we've done before? Could we, and I hate even having this conversation because it's horrifying, to lay people off and then hire them back if we're able to, or we can? I mean, or is it?
Well, I think at this point we prepare, we're ready to go, but we wait for the governor's budget.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend doing layoffs in June. I think we need to wait for the budget first. But we may consider a resolution at the last meeting of June if there's a budget that's already approved. That could be an option. If the state approves something that puts this into play, I wouldn't hold out that we could potentially have a resolution on that second meeting of June. But I would say that would be
if you wait longer than that, then aren't you going beyond the 45 days?
No, not with this provision. So this is different timelines. So yeah.
And all of these things, Ms. Reed, would be happening simultaneously. So we would be working with attorneys immediately to get this process rolling, and they don't go in line. It would be happening all together. So I agree with Dr. Chernis. I think we would have to see, we will be, from the human resources perspective, we'll be thinking about different numbers, from the most drastic number all the way down to very little. So we'll be making suggestions there. And I agree with him. I think it would be a bit premature to do that, but if we got started right at the beginning of July, then we would hit those timelines. But I agree with you. It's terrible to talk about, terrible to think about, and we're crossing our fingers that we don't get to this point. But,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. My question is, if we are going to have to do this, I would prefer to let teachers know sooner than later, even if they were on the radar for their program being cut, so that they have an opportunity perhaps to seek employment or just prepare themselves rather than waiting, the minimum time frame. I don't know if that is something that you would be willing to undertake, but I would like to see recommendations. Again, it's the more time we can give people that their job may be impacted, I think would be beneficial to them.
Well, I think what we will do is the board's going to get a budget in the first meeting of June. And so at that meeting, there will be a recommended reduction based on the best forecast we have.
Okay.
At that time, we can bring forward some initial areas that we can focus on. And so maybe that'll give, some indication, but it's very preliminary.
Understood. Hopefully we don't have to do any of it, but I just want, as I mentioned, to give people a little bit of time. The more time we can give them, the better. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the tough thing, that the interesting thing that in this process is, and it happens in the March 15th process as well, is we're thinking about some layoffs, yet we will continue to bring certain people back during this time. We have some temporary teachers, some probe ones, and probationary teachers that will be, coming in. So that's the hard thing. And again, I hear you, Board Member Brack, that we will be mindful of if we know, and that's the conversations that I'm having with temporary teachers now, because we have quite a few. We still have flexibility with our temporary teachers and the number that we have, as well as we expect, and we're getting in daily some folks who are resigning or retiring during this time. There's some people that have recently resigned because they're moving back home, back to family because of everything that's happening on. It's changed. So as we get those in, that will impact what we have to do with our staffing as well, because we can now not backfill positions and we can take everything into consideration. And the less people that we have to impact, our current staff, especially with some of our youngest, brightest, and, teachers that, that we really want to retain. So it's fluid. It's tough. It's one of those things that it's California budgeting for schools. It's a tough thing. And we wonder, how are we bringing people back? And yet we're talking about layoffs. So I would say just let's remain patient. I will try to be as transparent and open and help you understand the process, as we move through it. And as you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. And if we get to that point, we'll definitely be working with, our attorneys are working hand in hand with us during the process. And we have a good one, Sharon Ormond, who's we've worked with in the past. Actually, in the last few years, we've done a lot to prepare for these times with getting our seniority list updated. So we're in good position to make that timeline happen. Hopefully we don't have to.
Yeah, to me, this is, oh, Rick, you can go.
So Matt, do we understand what it takes from us in order to allow the teacher to file for unemployment should they get a layoff notice from us? And when would they be able to start collecting unemployment? Because there are enhanced benefits, I think, through the end of September, at least right now.
Mm-hmm. So this process, should it go through, we would probably be right up to August 15th. I would say I don't think we get it done much quicker. And at that point in time, then teachers would be informed, they would get final notice. And at that point in time, they could then apply for benefits.
So there wouldn't be a way to get them benefits prior to August 15th if we, change the schedule so that we weren't waiting till that. I guess that's what I'm asking. Is there some way that we could accelerate it for those who get caught in this so that they could, not get hit as hard?
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because I think we heard some things at the last board meeting about some of the particular employee group. With our teachers, they don't get paid in the summer. So they wouldn't, and that's part of, and when I talked about that, one of the folks who made comment last time is they got
a music teacher, right?
Reasonable assurance, right? Saying you'll come back, and that we provide reasonable assurance to our employees because that does not allow them to, because they're in 10-month or 11-month employee, that doesn't allow them to collect unemployment at that point in time. What I will tell you is there may be some groups that we can inform prior to, and like that are classified staff members or unrepresented, that may very likely they could start collecting before, if that was the board's direction to lay some of those folks off. But with certificated teachers, it would be right up until that August 15th moment, where with classified, we have to give them 60 days notice, and they could, and at that end of that time, if we did lay them off, then they could start collecting at that point in time.
Okay. And then, there's this whole process in here with the OAH, and it seems like, since this is common to all districts across the state who are getting slammed by the budget cuts at the state level of $18 billion to education, seems like they'd get slammed with the request. So is there a cost to reserving a date in advance? Does it make sense to do anything with the OAH, sooner rather than later, to make sure that whole process goes through smoothly?
Yeah, one of the benefits of working with our attorneys is they have the far better access than just us working on it. One of the things that I know, and I don't know the exact cutoff though, is if you reserve the OAH and if you go to up too close and then cancel them, then they charge you. But I believe there is a timeline that if you cancel that hearing date, then you're not charged that. But I have to look into that a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think it would be prudent to see, just figure that out for us. And if there's no charge till after the June 30th meeting, at least maybe even reserve a date or two so that we have things in place.
For sure.
Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
So is there, or you mentioned the classified 60-day window, are they entitled to OAH hearings as well, or is that a different process?
Different process.
Okay, thanks.
Megan?
So I hate all of this conversation. It's literally insane to me that, I understand that you have to bring this forward, and other districts are going to be bringing it forward as well. And this is all hypothetical and hopefully will not happen, but it's literally insane that when we're talking about all of these social distancing guidelines and all of this stuff, having less kids in a class, that now people are talking about cutting teachers, which will then increase class sizes. Like, it absolutely does not make any sense to me, and it makes me so angry, just in general, with like how education is funded in our state and by the federal government, that it is so low on the priority list that this is literally what we're talking about. On top of the fact that the teachers have literally, done so much to change over the past 2 months with trying to help our students and teach them. And then, oh yeah, well, thank you for doing all of that. By the way, now you're not going to have a job next year. Like, this is how they're being rewarded. And I'm not trying to direct any of this at you. It's just my frustration in general with the system. And I know that other teachers are going to feel the same way. And again, I'm sure that they're having all of these conversations throughout the state, unfortunately. So I think that, we have to be cognizant of talking to our teachers, and if we didn't see the need to lay people off before March 15th, and there's no drastic enrollment changes over the summer or anything, like, I don't see why we would need, from an enrollment standpoint or something, to lower people in the fall. It doesn't make sense. I get that we do need to lower costs, but for me, I'm going to be advocating 100% to look at all of these different places that we can lower costs that do not include laying off people. And I know that, the district is going to take that stance as well. Obviously, we don't want anyone to lose their job, but I just want to keep that in mind. And while we're discussing this, if we can just reiterate to teachers that this is happening everywhere, and that it's just frustrating. Like, it's frustrating that this conversation even has to happen. That's how mad I am. I'm so mad. So whatever we can do to not lay people off, that's what I'm going to be advocating for, because we're having the same amount of students. I mean, we saw Dr. Chernus tonight saying how there's even higher enrollment happening. So there's higher enrollment happening, and yet people are talking about laying people off and having smaller class sizes. It doesn't make sense. It's the opposite of what we should be doing. So, so if we can continue to keep that in mind, and I know that we will, but I'm just making sure that's clear, that we continue to do that and do every single thing that we can so that not one person is laid off, in my opinion. So I know that Matt and Dr. Chernus and everyone, you'll work hard to do that, and Brenna coming from a financial standpoint too. So I'll work together to make sure that everyone can keep their job.
So Megan, are you advocating salary cuts? Because I mean, it's kind of, you got to do something, right? There's only so many dollars. So in personnel is 85% of the budget. So I understand the desire we all have to minimize layoffs and to maintain programs. But the other side of that is, if you take salary cuts, then there are less layoffs. Is that what you're advocating, to save teachers and keep class ratios?
Good question. Well, of course, I would advocate for higher revenue. So I know Matt brought up today, looking at our land, and I know that we've talked about, some things for our preschool program and bringing in more tuition there. So obviously I would, on the forefront, I'd advocate for more revenue, whether that's something that we can do or we can continue to advocate at the state or federal level, like we're doing. But for me, I would say not necessarily a cut, but a freeze on the step-in column. Again, that's just my personal opinion. I'm trying to think of the collective body in general and how we can help people overall. And that may be different than what other people think, or PVFA thinks. And I think PVFA, it's the executive board might have a different opinion than all of the teachers that work in our district. So for me, I'm trying to think of the collective whole of teachers and how can we keep all of them. So if that means that we all do something to help each other, that's what I would advocate for, and helping all students. Because if we do end up cutting teachers, then of course there's going to be an increase in class size, and I don't think that they're going to want that. So that's what I would say, but everyone is different, and I would just say if there's a way that we can look at other ways to cut costs and increase revenue, that would be my main priority.
Okay. Well, I think that long before we get to that place, the board will have money budget conversations and hopefully get clarity on if we do get a $10 million cut, or if we look like we might get only a $6 million cut. Any of these cuts are a problem because we actually need more revenue, not less. Opening schools will cost more this year than in the past years, because we will have to do things to allow kids to come back to school in a healthy environment that are not going to be cost neutral. They're going to cost us money. And we, again, are having to figure out how to deal with unfunded mandates, essentially, that are coming down, right? So I don't think a single person wants any employees to be laid off. We want to keep all of our teachers, all of our classified staff. We need everybody on board to get our kids back to school. So we will be very creative and look at every opportunity, and there'll be options that we're going to have to go through. Maybe we'll get lucky, and for some reason, none of this will come to fruition. It doesn't look like that, but we don't know. So Megan, I appreciate your concern. I think every single person has that same exact concern. Nobody wants to have fewer people, but many of us know lots of folks who work in industry who have taken pay cuts. And that is just the new reality on furlough days across all kinds of industries. And it's not great, but we will do the best we can to get through it. And so this is an item we're not going to vote on or anything tonight. It's just for us to have had the conversation so people know what the possibilities are. I thought it was important we didn't wait on that. So if we have nothing else on that, are we ready to move on to the next item?
No, I just, if I may, I just want to, I appreciate Megan's passion towards this, and the whole board feels the same way. The last thing we want to see is somebody leave our district. So I appreciate you sharing your viewpoint on this, and reminding us of the absolutely human nature that we're dealing with. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. Then let's move on to R3, Palos Verdes Pennsylvania High School District Draft 2020 LCAP COVID-19 Operations Written Report. This is presented for discussion and no actions required. So we were given the document to read in advance. Does who is actually speaking to this? Is that Lindsay or
That's
Alex
me.
or Lindsay? Okay.
That's me. Thank you so much, President Seymour. So normally at this time, we would be providing the board with the draft of the LCAP plan. But because of the school closures and the coronavirus, an executive order was issued in late April. So what that has done is basically created this report as a way to report out to our county and our state regarding what we've been doing for distance learning during this time of closure. And it does push the deadline to December. So we will have an LCAP in December, pending the guidelines stay the same. And so we are just submitting this for your review as a draft, and we'll be bringing it back with the budget in June for a first read, and then again for approval at the end of June.
Okay. All right. So I would suggest if anyone has anything super concrete or interesting that they want to share, they can do it now or send a document to Dr. Gotanda to include. I know the night is late and we still have people waiting to begin our agenda. Rick, did you have anything you wanted to share right now?
I just wanted to thank Lindsay and her staff for taking care of another compliance item for the wonderful state of California and CDE.
Yeah, they never stop, actually. All right, then let's move on to Measure M Consumer Report Index Adjustment, R4. Trent, we have our...
Gretchen is joining.
Okay, so Gretchen Karner is joining us. Here she is. Thank you. Sorry for the late evening. Gretchen?
So, just so everybody knows, what we do is each year we bring this item back to the board. Typically it is done in March. However, due to circumstances, it got pushed out a little. The committee did convene, met, and they did put together the recommendation to the board for an increase to the CPI of 2.99. I will let our awesome chair, Gretchen, present to the board now.
It looks like she's getting her audio to work, so let's see here. Okay, there we go.
Okay, sorry, I was on the phone. Hello.
Okay, we can't hear you, Gretchen, so I think you need to put your earbuds back in. I'm not sure.
We could hear you when you dialed in, but we haven't been able to hear you on the computer.
That's what happens when we make you come on to the meeting at 9:40 on a Wednesday night and everyone's had a long day. Sorry about that. Oops, wait, we lost her. I think she
I think she's going to join back in a second. I'll see if she joins back in the waiting room, and then I'll.
Maybe she joined in as a not an audio, and maybe that's what her
she's
connection was.
in a second.
Okay. All right. Okay. We cannot hear you. I'm sorry to tell you. I don't know if you can hear us, but.
I'm going to unmute her.
Oh, okay. Yeah. She's muted. Okay. There we go. Did that work? No.
Did you?
There we go. Yeah. We got it.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I think you guys were muting me. Anyway. All right. The item I think that you're on is the consumer price
increase.
Yes.
Okay, because I know there's two items and I think I can do it separately. All right. So, hello, board. I'm Gretchen Karner. I'm the chairman of the Measure M committee. And we had our meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we have discussed whether or not to recommend to the board to increase the Measure M parcel tax by the CPI for this year, and we all unanimously voted to recommend it. So that would mean that the new parcel tax would be increased by I think right now it's 2.99%, so that the amount would go up about the same, $13.50 or so per parcel. We all decided that because of the drastic budget cuts that the district's facing, that we all work together as a community and increase that parcel tax by this very small amount. So that's our recommendation. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Do I have questions from anybody on the board? Or does staff want to weigh in on ask and add anything?
I'll make a motion that the board approve the recommendation from the Citizens Oversight Committee to increase the parcel tax by the CPI in effect as of June 30th, 2020 for the 2020 to 21 budget year.
Okay, thank you. Rick, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Linda. Okay, great. And this would be a roll call vote. So Brock? Oops. I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, I thought we'd have discussion after the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear anybody raise their hand or say anything, so I moved right onto the motion. So wait, no, Rick made...
It's moved and seconded. Now there's discussion. We can have discussion.
Okay. Yeah.
And all I want to say is Measure M, one of its primary focuses is to reduce class sizes. So now more than ever, as we are looking at this budget shortfall, this money would be directly beneficial towards teachers, and so I am fully in support of it. I hope the community as well recognizes that this is money that will go towards retaining our quality teachers.
Okay. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, back to the roll call vote. So, Board Member Brock.
Aye.
Crawford.
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Phillips.
Aye.
Seymour, aye. Okay, that's 5-0. And we really could, I can't imagine our budget with $9.2 million less in it. That would be unreal for us to deal with. So thank you. Now moving on to our 5 parcel tax proposed annual plan for the 2021 budget. And that is Gretchen Karner, President, again.
Okay, so I don't know if people listening know what Measure M was, but it was a measure that was voted in by our community in 2011, and it's the funds are supposed to be used for keeping classroom technology up to date, provide advanced academic programs in math, science, technology, attract and retain the most qualified and experienced teachers and school employees, keep neighborhood school facilities and grounds clean and well maintained, keep textbooks and instructional materials up to date, provide advanced educational programs that help local students get into the best colleges and prepare for successful careers, maintain manageable class sizes, and continue funding for art, music, and physical education. The last few years, the committee has made it a priority to allocate most of the money to teachers. So this year, we all unanimously decided to keep the 85% allocation to support teachers' salaries and maintain small classes if we can. Under the circumstances here, all the money you guys can get, I'm sure, would be appreciated. So we're going to keep that. Our recommendation is that we keep that at the same level at 85%. The debate in the committee was focused more on the 15%. And last year we had allocated the 15%, 5% to funding advanced programs in math, science, and technology, and then the remaining 10% for retaining qualified teachers in technology and keeping classrooms technology up to date. This year, there was a debate on do we keep that the same, or do we combine those two categories, meaning funding advanced programs, STEM and advanced placement, things like that, separate as a 5%, or do we just add it all together to give the board the flexibility to use the money wherever it deems necessary, especially in these times where remote learning needs technological support in a big way. And at the time we met, we had no idea what the governor's budget cuts were going to be or what you're facing at this point. So we, as a committee, decided that we would combine those two categories and make it a 15% category, and therefore give you guys flexibility to use it however you want. There were two divergent views, or not divergent, but two different views on that issue. And I want to bring up one of the points against combining was that we are concerned that some of the money should be definitely used toward, textbooks and technology updates for the advanced placement and STEM programs. So we don't want to take that away from funding the books. As I see on the agenda tonight, lots of books are being approved, or at least two different ones that are being funded with this Measure M money. So the bottom line is the committee is recommending 85% to be allocated toward teachers and 15% to be allocated toward this bigger category of technology, what do we call it? Sorry. Fund advanced programs in math, science, and technology, and retain qualified and experienced technology staff and keep classroom technology up to date. And the main reason for that change was to give you guys the most flexibility and to be able to spend the money where it's direly needed. So do you guys have any questions?
Thank you very much. Very, thank you for your report. Does anybody from the board have any specific questions for Ms. Carter?
I'll just say that the committee's discussion was very thorough, and they spent a lot of time really figuring out the best way to be most flexible for us as a board, which I certainly appreciate. Thank you, Ms. Garner.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, you guys.
Right.
Appreciate
it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. We all appreciate, it's a lot of conversations. Essentially, it's gonna fund very similar things. It just gives us more flexibility in the dollar amounts across the board. So that's obviously very well appreciated. So anybody else, or we can move on to a motion.
Well, I hope this goes better than the last time the committee chose to have a different recommendation than the prior year. But I'll move that the board approve the recommendation from the Citizens Oversight Committee to adopt the parcel tax measure M proposed annual plan for the 2020 to 21 budget, and thank the committee for giving the board more flexibility to meet the challenges of the times.
Do I have a second?
I thankfully second.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay, then Brock, Board Member Brock, are you in favor?
Aye.
Crawford?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Phillips?
Aye.
Seymour? Aye. Okay, that's 5-0. And thank you very much. That passed. Thank you, Ms. Kerner. You can check in, check out, whatever you want to do. You can hang out with us, whatever. Thank you. It's
All right.
such
Thank
a
you very
great
much.
time, I know.
All right. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. So we pulled R6. We're not discussing that this evening. So that brings us to R7, which is our revised Board of Education calendar of meetings. We talked last time about adding some. I mentioned we were going to. These are the proposed dates. We know we can always add and subtract. Well, we can cancel meetings if we don't need them. We can add meetings if we need to add meetings. We know we have to meet in July. I've told everyone, I think, that we will be meeting at least twice a month from here on out. And do we have any comments on the proposed revisions?
Suzanne, do you anticipate us meeting remotely for the duration of the summer, or it's just impossible to predict?
I don't know. I was asking Alex that today. I would really prefer us to get back together in the boardroom. But I don't think we're allowed to do that, honestly, until, I mean,
Well,
it's more than 10 of us. So
more than 10.
I mean, Rancho PD City Council is moving back together.
Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah.
So
I think we can. I think we can, as long as the public has the ability to, still communicate. We'd probably do the same thing, as far as public comment, because we'd be stuck at 10. But, what we're hearing is we may move quicker into stage 3. So,
Okay, but regardless, we can still call in if we're somewhere in the summertime.
It's going to be that way. And honestly, we won't be able to have public comment. You're not going to be able to have a boardroom full of 50 people or 100 people. We're going to have some kind of this situation, at least until we can have large gatherings, which is not going to be anytime that soon. So there's going to be some kind of remote meetings, whether it's us. I think it's easier for us. Maybe I'm just me. I think it's easier to make decisions when we're all together in the room. I really prefer that. But I also want to respect everybody's willingness or not willingness to leave their house and to mix with people and all that kind of thing. So we don't know, Linda.
Okay.
We'd also have to rearrange the boardroom, right? Because the dais, we'd have to take out half the chairs on the dais, for example, or something, so that we'd
have to figure out something different.
And do technological adaptation then to get us all on camera in different spots, for example.
Okay, but the dates are fine. We can let the cities do the heavy lifting. Maybe they'll give us some ideas. Okay.
Fair enough.
We can all have a cone of silence. But I would just like to add that I am eager to get back into the boardroom. I think that if we are asking our teachers and our students to return to school, that we should be setting an example for them as well. That we should be on site and as opposed to working completely remotely.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have an issue with that. I just think it's an issue of the mechanism to get that to happen. So yeah. Megan, any comments on the proposed calendar?
Nope, no proposal on the dates. I'm still on the more cautious side myself with going and who I'm seeing. So I guess for me, I might wait a bit to go back to the boardroom, just personally. But the dates are fine with me, and I may feel more comfortable as more, numbers keep dropping. But the dates are fine.
Okay. And I mean, and people can go on vacation if they want to go, if they're going to go somewhere, and they can take road trips, or they can do whatever they want to do. And they'll be able to call in, like, you know, what we're doing now. There'll be no difference in that. So that's actually kind of easier. So, all right, well, if there's no other comments, we can always cancel meetings if we really don't think we need them at this point. So this adds the July 8th, July 22nd, and August 5th dates. So that has us meeting 3 times in August and twice in July, and obviously we meet twice in June. So
So I move that the board revise the schedule of our regular meetings of the Board of Education during the period from July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 to include 3 additional meetings on Wednesday, July 8th, 2020, Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020, and Wednesday, August 5th, 2020.
thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, then all in favor, Brock,
Aye.
Crawford,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes, acknowledge your all of your work in doing this summer, President Seymour as well. Yes.
I have no vacation plans. It's great. Yeah. Thank you. Phillips.
Aye.
Seymour, aye. All right, that passes 5-0. I really hoped we would not have to meet this summer, but nope, it's fine. All right, so now we're moving on to consent. Moving right along. So,
Hey, we had one summer off, right? 2019, we didn't really have extra meetings. 2018, we had a ton.
then it's honestly, and people always say, how much work is the school board? I'm like, 40, 50 hours a week. It's great. Just kidding. It actually is a lot of fun. So on the consent calendar, let's go around. Does anybody want to pull anything on consent? Megan? No. Linda?
No.
Rick?
Yes, S2E.
S2E. Okay, and Matt?
No.
No. All right, then do I have a motion for S1A, S2A, S2C, S2D, S3A, S3B, S3C, and S4A?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All right, then all in favor. So Board Member Brock?
Aye.
Crawford?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Phillips?
Aye.
Seymour? Aye. Okay, 5-0, that passes. And now, Rick, S2E.
Yeah, so I have no objection actually to appointing these members to the CIF, but I would like them, to advocate for our student athletes and appropriate accommodations to allow them to participate safely over the coming year. The CIF produced on May 21st interim guidance that said nothing. Basically all it said was, we'll figure it out when all the schools are back in session, and I would hope that our representative advocate for more forceful action. I think it's pretty clear with the guidance coming down from LA County that non-contact sports are going to be allowed to resume prior to contact sports. And so as I understand, the contact sports are, football, basketball, soccer. And so I'd like, our representatives to, advocate with CIF to consider moving seasons potentially so that those contact sports still could have a full season of competition and, exchanging some of those with non-contact sports. Water polo is the one that I'm unclear on because chlorine does kill the virus and swimming is considered a non-contact sport, but it's not clear to me if water polo is contact or non-contact, and water polo is a fall sport. So, I would hope that our CIF representatives advocate. And I guess I don't know if the ADs are 10, 11th, or 12-month positions. I know that the principals, who are 2 of them here, are 12-month positions. And so, I'd like to get that, get some clarity for all the athletes really in LA County and the Bay League prior to the fall so that they can be prepared, because they need to train as well. And be prepared to, engage in competition safely. Right now, as I understand it, only individual training is allowed. Team training is not allowed under the current county public health orders. And so I realize that it is dynamic, but, I would hope that they would be advocating for our student athletes. students. And we did have an anonymous comment on this as well tonight.
And I have received quite a few comments and questions. People are very confused as to what is allowed, what is not allowed. Now we're not being allowed to do Zoom workouts. Like, it's just very confusing for kids and parents. And so we have all these incoming 9th graders that are so excited about high school and they don't understand what they're allowed to do and not do. So anything we can do to provide clarity for our families would be, even if it's, we don't know, we're working on these things, you know, that is helpful. So I do appreciate Ricky bringing that up, and hope we can get there. So if there's nothing else, Rick, did you want to make a motion to approve that?
I'll move that the board approve the designation of Brent Kuykendall and Glenn Van Eck, Principal and Athletic Director, Palos Verdes Peninsula High School, and Alan Tyner and Brian Shapiro, Principal and Athletic Director, Palos Verdes High School, as California Interscholastic Federation voting representatives for the 2020-21 school year.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, and then all in favor, Board Member Brock.
Aye.
Crawford?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Phillips?
Aye.
And Seymour? Aye. That is 5-0. All right, we have made it through the consent calendar. All right, so moving right along to T, future agenda items. I feel like I'm a little disheveled here. So I said last meeting we would work on these dates, and I did not get that down with Dr. Chernus. So I did look at them, and some of them I don't know what we're going to do. We just have so much up in the air. I did add tonight, add minutes for committee meetings, and we should have that conversation. A couple of things are going to get off of there, but I think when we have more meetings in the summer, it'll be a little bit easier to add a few things, you know, every meeting so we can see. I guess what I'm going to say is we're going to have to agree that we can talk about that item, but I don't know that we're going to get a lot of progress on some things, because it makes no sense to add things that are costly when we're going to be eliminating things that, you know, we're doing, at least in my, you know, my mind. So I am committed to doing a better job and getting those agendized with Dr. Chernus next meeting. Does anybody want to add anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, just to jump in. So with that, do you think that that maybe, you know, even if they're not addressed over the summer, but maybe we could have some sort of general timeline of saying, okay, we'll look at these in the summer, this in the fall.
Yeah, I think we can add a column. I think to Board Member Crawford's suggestion, we can add a column to that, like for an estimated agenda time, you know, time to address it. And then something like that.
The other thing is I have something I'm actually fine taking off now. I put on there end time for board meetings, but I think overall we're doing a great job. No, like the reason why I put that on there to begin with was because I heard that some other districts did that, and you know, our best thinking probably isn't done at 11 o'clock at night, but I think that overall we've been good, and I think that in the future, if it does get that late, I think that we would just come to a consensus like, hey, why don't we pick up again another time? So I'm fine with removing that.
Okay, I love that. Thank you. I mean, some boards meet all the time. Some boards have special board meetings all the time, and they keep having things go back on the next agenda, and they agendize it. We really don't do that. So I mean, I guess people operate in different ways, you know, that makes sense for them. So I appreciate you taking that one off. But I do think we need to add that, or we need to add the third column that indicates the date of when it's coming. Because ultimately, I want to get that on our website so that when people can see what's coming up, they would have an item on our own agenda page for the district that would show future items and when they might get heard. So people could kind of look ahead. I've seen that at other school districts too. So was there anything anybody else wanted to add to future?
Yeah, so just following up on the whole technology advisory committee thing too, I think that there's a bunch of IT kind of items on here that could be, you know, combined into one massive agenda topic, so to speak. But there's the privacy, Google versus Microsoft.
Yeah.
The online classes is actually an ed services issue. there's a piece of IT in there. But the RFP for the SIS, what are the options out there? The analysis of learning management systems and the email system for the board. I think all could be kind of one large session that Trent could, prepare for and guide us through. Or maybe we do it as a study session. I know we just added three regular sessions, but maybe we do some of it as a study session. But I do think that that's all doable in one meeting.
Yeah, I think that's true. And Trent, I think as you work on the Google versus Microsoft platform conversation anyway, if you think that would make more sense to have a special meeting that we just dedicated to that topic and things around that, feel free to mention that. I don't know what we're going to have on our next meeting. We don't want to shortchange any topics. We don't want to shortchange budgeting issues or staffing or anything else. So feel free to let us know if you think we need to dedicate like a 2-hour session for that. Okay, and that's fine. So I appreciate that. All right, anything else? Okay, so then let's go to report of board members. Let me ask if anyone wants to volunteer to go first tonight. No?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, so I will be quick. So the main thing that I wanted to bring up tonight was making sure as elected officials and district staff that we need to realize that our words matter and what we say really does make an impact on people at home. And it's important that the words that we say have intention behind them. Or what is your intention behind the words that you are trying to say? I think it's important to realize that sometimes, this happens to everyone. You say something and it came out a different way than what you meant, or you said something and thought it was going to be portrayed as one way, but people took it the other way. So I think that that's just important for us to all keep in mind is like, okay, when we're saying things, what's the intention? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the meaning behind them? So I think that that is something that we need to keep in mind. And keeping in mind too that we have a lot of people watching now, especially since we're online. We have a lot of teachers especially who are watching too. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. And speaking of teachers, it is important that we will continue to work together during normal times, but especially during this time and throughout the summer and fall. So I just want to reach out to that group specifically and say if any of you want to reach out via email or text or call me if you have my number. I would love to hear from you directly and individually to see if there's anything that you want to talk about or have, anything that you want to say. I'm always here, and especially just to the community in general. Parents and students love hearing from you too. But I think it's really important that we all continue to work well with our teachers. So just putting that out there that they can always reach out to me, and just making sure again that we all remember, that our words mean something, and that we just have to continue to think about that when we make comments. And that's it.
All right, thanks, Megan. And do I have a second volunteer?
I'll volunteer, I guess. So I guess my coffees with a school board member are also getting more popular since they're on Zoom, and it's easier to Zoom than go to a coffee shop. And so we did have actually a pretty robust discussion at the last meeting that was I think useful. It included teachers, and so I'm glad that teachers are attending those. I'm also very happy that the county public health department has eased the rules regarding car parades, so that our students can celebrate their graduations and be recognized in a way that's not ideal, but it's certainly better than doing a virtual graduation. So I'm hopeful that we'll have car parade celebrations for all three of our high school grads, and also hopefully for some of the promotion ceremonies at the intermediate and elementary schools. I also believe that our students continue to deserve more than correspondence courses, and that it's important that all our students have good distance learning experiences where they receive real instruction from their teachers, because I think we all recognize the value of our great teachers. I do think that that CC represents her, PVFA well, I think she does a good job of advocating for the teachers and PVFA's interests. I do think that there are times where there are differences of opinion between what's best for the district and for the students and what PVFA takes as certain positions. And certainly certain positions taken by CTA as opposed to PVFA, I think are not necessarily in our district's best interest. I did reach out to CC actually before the last meeting, and CC reached out to me today after our comments, and I hope to have a continuing productive dialogue with PVFA, both during the meetings and outside the meetings.
Okay. Who's up next?
I'll go next. Or Linda, I'm sorry, Linda, did you want to go? No, I'll go next then. Yes, I'm probably the king of what was my intent when speaking. But I just hope people understand that my intent is always going to be what's best for the students. When you're sitting up here, it's hard to make a decision that's not going to make somebody mad. There are too many different viewpoints, and that's what makes the country great, is these differing viewpoints. But anything you say, anything you do, is more than likely going to make somebody unhappy. So you just have to keep in mind that what is the goal? What is the goal here? And the goal here is always for me, what is going to be best for our students? What's going to give them the best chance in life? And that's how I frame all my decisions, is on what is going to be best for the students. Different ways to get there. We're not always going to agree, but I think most of us would agree that that is what our focus should be. That's really all I have. These meetings, we cover a lot. Nothing all that exciting going on around the old Brock household here to share with anybody. So thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, Linda?
I have a couple really unrelated things for you guys. The first is that everyone likes to make a big deal about Penn, PV, rivals, students don't like each other, whatever. That's baloney, and that our Penn and PV students are actually very much in agreement that they very much want an in-person graduation if it's possible anytime later in the summer, and they don't like drive-throughs, and they don't like virtuals, and they don't like any of that. And I appreciate the work of Dr. Kuykendall and Dr. Tyner and their staffs to make that happen if it's possible, as a mother of a high school senior, as President Seymour is herself. So I appreciate all of their work. As far as anonymous comments go, I think the way I'm going to look at it is that we have to accept them, but if you're going to comment anonymously or use the name of that's a fake name or a name from a television show that I watch, then I'm not going to take what you say into consideration. But we had some really wonderful comments from our teachers tonight that I very much will take into consideration as just one board member going forward. I read today or yesterday that one of the genius ideas in local government is to use our schools as polling places in November. And that's just another example of government ridiculous, stupid behavior, that you're going to keep kids out of school and put in all these safety measures. And now you're going to march thousands of people into your schools. Oh, and by the way, let's close school for a few days when we do that. So this is the kind of thing that we can really help advocate for. I know that President Seymour and Dr. Chernus have talked to Elmer Atsushi. I don't know if he's not getting the message, but just keeping us online and now using our schools as election sites is just ridiculous and outrageous. And I'll probably get in trouble for anything more that I say in that regard. That doesn't make me very happy. I did Zoom talk with a couple of PVFA members from Vista Grande, and we had a great conversation. And they just wanted me to share with the staff and my colleagues that their biggest issue is making sure that there's elementary specific training for online teaching. And they specifically mentioned Stacy Upton as being a great person that they hope to work with more. So I just wanted to share that with all of you as their elementary reps. And lastly, I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of one of our classified staff members. Melanie Browlight was the office manager at Vista Grande, and as we all know, office managers make schools happen. She was a wonderful lady. I've known her for many years as a parent, and I just want to offer my condolences to her sons on her passing. She's really a wonderful lady and a big loss for our community. And that's it.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for mentioning that. I did also read the article about using our school sites for election sites and closing our schools October 31 through the election day for 4 school days. And I thought, who comes up with this stuff? Are you kidding? So that was a little disturbing, but probably it won't come to fruition. So we'll see. My comments, I have to say the highlight, if I leave the house and go somewhere and I drive around the peninsula, the highlight is always the signs that I see everywhere now, from PV and from Penn and from the ranch and from Marilust and all the little elementary kid signs. I mean, it is really the funnest thing to see everyone in the community get behind our graduates at whatever level you are and put signs out. So, you know, that's, I don't know, just a feel good moment. I think we need a lot of those for sure. At least I think I do. So I appreciate all the staff work and all the driving that went into place for all those kids to get those. And I think, you know, people are very proud of them. So that's just really very fun. I have a few things. I really feel like I've talked to so many parents and kids about summer school options and summer school specific issues and questions. And now that we're distance learning, I really feel like it's time to change our summer school policy and to not necessarily change it, but to make it more specific the way it's written. And we don't have a summer school policy specifically for just summer school. We have different policies that feed into what you can do when you're not taking classes at PVP USD. So it's my intention, while this is still fresh in my mind, to draft something that we can consider so that we don't have quite as much confusion in the future. And I think distance learning has added a piece to it because all of our kids are distance learning now. So we used to have these different mechanisms that you couldn't take classes online if you were a certain grade or a certain age or whatever. And perhaps that should not be this case anymore because we have kids at every grade distance learning, and clearly people can handle that. So we'll work on that. I will bring that. We will do a first and a second read, and hopefully we can get that hammered out before next summer school. It won't impact this summer school. But it's just been a thing that Linda had on the list for me to take care of. I felt like I didn't get it done, and now we've just had a lot of confusion about it. So I want every child in our district to be able to have every opportunity that they want, and we shouldn't stand in the way of that. Number one. Number two, I think that after the bond election, and talking to people about what's going on today, we need some kind of a group on the Hill that is a Friends of PVP USD or Friends of Peninsula Education, and not PEF specifically. They serve a very specific purpose, and maybe this would be part of PEF, I don't know. But I've run into many seniors who have shared that, 75% of our residents are not members. They don't have kids in the district. So they don't have a great way to connect with what's going on with the district. And they don't want to hear from us only when we want to pass a bond. And many of them went to our schools and they're graduates, and we don't really have a well-functioning alumni mechanism for all the different school sites. So I put it out there that a couple people asked me about it and said, well, maybe I would help you. So I said, okay, maybe I'll work on that. So I just want everyone to think about it. How can we do this? I really don't want to start another new thing. Maybe it belongs as part of a PEF arm. I don't know. But people want to be connected to our schools. People are worried about public education. We have lots of residents that are all about public education, don't know how they can connect with us. So I just feel like we need to, work together to figure out how to make that happen. And anybody that's listening, anybody that wants to do that, anybody who wants to help out, I'm willing to listen and help figure out how to create that, energetic group that keeps public schools, at the forefront of their giving and their thinking and all their creativity. our public libraries are going to reopen next week for curbside delivery and pickup. So that's a great thing. So our kids and their parents can go back and get library books. They already have a bunch of electronic, opportunities for us, but it's great that they're going to be offering the curbside pickup. And I think for the next board meeting, we were talking about having them on the agenda, so we can just talk about what's available within the library district that people could take advantage of over the summer. And with that, that is my last comment. And I thank everybody for hanging in there. It's 10:20. I thought this would be a shorter meeting, and I guess it was shorter than last time, but they're never that short. So anyway, I wish everyone a good night. And if there's nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting and thank everybody at 10:20. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Right.
Bye.